The board will now come to order. Madam Clerk, please call the roll.
Alderwoman Schweitzer. Alderman Oldenburg. Alderman Cone.
Present.
Alderman Narayan.
Here.
Alderman Devoti.
Here. Making fun of my own outfit.
Alderwoman Velasquez. Alderwoman Saunier. Alderwoman Cox Antwi. Alderman Browning. Alderwoman Clark Hubbard. Alderwoman Keys. Alderwoman Tyus. Alderwoman Boyd.
Present.
Alderman Aldridge.
Present.
President Green.
Present.
Alderman Oldenburg.
Here.
I didn't hear you, Alderman.
Present.
Alderman Oldenburg.
Present. Present.
Alderwoman Velasquez. Alderwoman Keys. Alderwoman Tyus.
Present.
We have 13 present. We have a quorum.
A quorum being present will be led in an opening reflection by the Executive Director of Developmental Disability Resources, Shailene Plank.
Good morning. My name is Shailene Plank, and I'm the Executive Director for the St. Louis Office for Developmental Disability Resources. Our agency is funded through a property tax levy the city voters approved in 1980 to help fund services for people with intellectual and developmental disabilities so that they can live, work, and participate fully in their communities. This year, we have been intentional about investing in North City. One of our partners providing services is Horizon Housing Development Company. They assist in providing housing services to St. Louis City homeless individuals with developmental and mental disabilities. I'm going to read you a story about a Horizon Housing consumer that illustrates the impact of the funds we invest. In 2022, I moved into Horizon Housing during one of the hardest seasons of my life. I came in with just my job, my family, and a determination to rebuild after being down on my luck. Soon after, I faced even more adversity, going through a divorce, transitioning into a new chapter, and becoming the full-time custodial parent of my son. Even in the midst of these challenges, Horizon Housing became the stable foundation I needed. With the support of the most amazing caseworker who consistently connected me to resources, guidance, and encouragement, I was able to not only survive, but truly grow into my potential. During my time here, I've had the opportunity to accomplish things I once couldn't even imagine. I graduated from Women in Leadership, moved from organizer to director of organizing at Bridge to Hope Parent Institute, contributed to We Power's Community Wealth Building Design Playbook, became a block captain with the Federation of Block Units in the Ville, and served as a strong advocate for tornado recovery, housing justice, and social justice in my community. Most importantly, I completed my first-time homebuyers program, and now I'm preparing to move forward into my next chapter as a homeowner. Horizon Housing was exactly the program I needed. It gave me stability, dignity, and room to rise. I came in from the streets, uncertain and struggling, and I'm leaving successful, confident, and empowered. I am forever grateful for this program and the people who poured into me. Horizon Housing didn't just give me a place to live, it helped me rebuild my life. This is just one of many success stories happening every day with one of the 40-plus agencies we are funding in fiscal year 26. You should have all recently received our annual report for fiscal year 25, and in it you can read more success stories about our agencies and how they are helping people live more independently, work meaningful jobs, and socialize and develop relationships. Our funds are helping your friends, relatives, and neighbors. That's why what we do is important, because people with developmental disabilities are important. Please continue to support people with developmental disabilities during March and all year long. Let's continue to work to make St. Louis City an inclusive and accessible city And please let your state legislators know that the services funded through personal property taxes are important to you. Thank you.
We will dispense with the regular order of business to take up the courtesy or the first reading of resolutions calendar. Alderman from the 14th, you're recognized on the motion to suspend the rules for the purposes of introducing Resolution 265.
Thank you, Madam President, members of the board. I move to suspend the rules and introduce Resolution 265.
It's been moved by the Alderman from the 14th, seconded by the Alderwoman from the 7th, that we suspend the rules for the purposes of introducing Resolution 265. Alderman, you may proceed.
Thank you, Madam President, members of the board. Resolution 265 is a resolution to be able to suspend our rules to introduce a board bill that the City Council gave me that needs to be introduced immediately that would do easement work when it comes to the PSAP, so Ameren can start the work with doing power lines and other items. So this resolution would change the last day to file board bills to today so that we can get this bill introduced, heard in public safety, and done through the Board of Aldermen before we go down to session so that the work on the PSAP 911 call center can continue to happen.
All right, it's been moved by the Alderman from the 14th, seconded by the Alderwoman from the 7th, that we suspend the rules for the purposes of introducing Resolution 265. This is a non-debatable motion. Madam Clerk, please call the roll.
Alderwoman Schweitzer. Aye. Alderman Oldenburg.
Aye.
Alderman Cone.
Pass.
Alderman Narayan.
Aye.
Alderman Devoti.
I'm conflicted because this is actually.
Alderwoman Velasquez. Alderwoman Saunier.
Aye.
Alderwoman Cox-Antwi.
Aye.
Alderman Brownie.
Aye.
Alderwoman Clark-Hubbard. Alderwoman Keys. Alderwoman Tyus. Alderwoman Boyd. Thank you. Alderwoman Boyd.
Aye.
Alderman Aldridge.
Aye.
President Green.
Aye.
Alderman Cone.
Aye.
Thanks, Michael. Sorry.
Alderwoman Velasquez. We have 14 aye votes.
By your vote, you sustain the motion from the Alderman from the 14th. Madam Clerk, if you could please place Board Bill 265 at the end of the first reading of resolutions.
So noted.
Alderwoman from the 1st, you are now recognized on the motion to suspend the rules for the purposes of introducing Resolution 266.
Thank you, Madam President, members of the board. I move to suspend the rules for the purposes of introducing Resolution 266.
It's been moved by the Alderwoman from the 1st, seconded by the Alderman from the 9th, that we suspend the rules for the purposes of introducing Resolution 266. Alderwoman, you may proceed.
Thank you, Madam President, members of the board. This resolution, very similar to something we passed a few weeks ago around a House bill, is opposing a Senate bill that would change how landfill tipping fees work and ultimately end with the defunding of many very important programs that we depend upon in the St. Louis region and across the state to work with the disposal of waste. With the folks who spoke on this last time, I do plan on sending this to committee if we're able to suspend the rules today to get it introduced, which is why I didn't want to have it introduced next week, because we wouldn't have had time to have it go to committee. So thank you so much for your time, and I hope to earn your support today.
It's been moved by the Alderwoman from the 1st, seconded by the Alderman from the 9th, that we suspend the rules for the purposes of introducing Resolution 266. This is a non-debatable motion. Madam Clerk, call the roll.
Alderwoman Schweitzer.
Aye.
Alderman Oldenburg.
Aye.
Alderman Cone. Alderman Narayan.
Aye.
Alderman Devoti.
Aye.
Alderwoman Velasquez. Alderwoman Saunier. Alderwoman Cox-Antwi. Alderman Brownie. Alderwoman Clark-Hubbard. Alderwoman Keys. Alderwoman Tyus.
Aye.
Alderwoman Boyd.
Aye.
Alderman Aldridge.
Aye.
President Green,
Aye.
Alderman Cone, Alderwoman Velazquez. We have 13 aye votes.
By your vote, you sustain the motion from the alderman from the alderwoman from the first. Madam Clerk, if you could please place Resolution 266 at the end of the first reading resolution.
So noted.
First reading resolutions.
Resolution 265, sponsored by Alderman Aldridge. Thank you. Resolution 265, sponsored by Alderman Aldridge. Last day for the introduction of board bill for sessions 2025-2026 legislative session. Whereas Board of Aldermen Rule 56 of the Rules of the Board 2025-2026 legislative session reads as follows. Rule 56, last day of introducing bills. The President shall, upon approval of the Board of Aldermen by resolution, establish the last day for introducing bills. Notice of said date should be posted on the automatic bulletin board, whereas President Green established Friday, March 20th, 2026 as the last day, full board meeting before Monday, April 26th, sine die meeting, which ends the board's 2025-2026 legislative session. And whereas Alderman Rasheen Aldridge planned to establish Friday, March 13th, 2026 as the last day to introduce board bills for the St. Louis Board of Aldermen's 2025-2026 legislative session. And whereas President Megan Green sponsored and received unanimous approval on Tuesday, April 15th, 2025, for Resolution Number 5, which established Friday, February 13th, 2026 as the last day to introduce board bills for the St. Louis Board of Aldermen 2025-2026 legislative session. And whereas, in accordance with the Board of Rule Number 60, the setting of Friday, March 13th as the last day to introduce board bills for the 2025-2026 legislative session must be established by approval of a Board of Aldermen specifying a date. And whereas by adoption of the resolution, Alderman Aldridge plans to change the last day to introduce board bills established by Resolution Number 5, approved on Tuesday, April 15th, 2025, from Friday, February 13th, 2026, to Friday, March 13th, 2026. Now, therefore, be it resolved that by adoption of this resolution, the Board of Aldermen hereby establishes Friday, March 13th, 2026, as the last day to introduce board bills for its legislative session before Monday, April 20th, 2026, sine die meeting, which will end the board's 25-26 legislative session. Introduced this 13th day of March, 2026, by the Honorable Megan Green, Board of Aldermen, co-sponsors, the Honorable Rasheen Aldridge, Alderman 14th Ward.
Alderman from the 14th, you're recognized on the first reading of Resolution 265.
Thank you, Madam President and members of the board. Resolution 265, again, as I mentioned earlier, this is to be able to make today the last day to introduce board bills. The City Council office reached out to me yesterday and saying there was a fumble and drop of the ball of getting the legislation to me. But what this would do, it would be an easement work that is needed so that power lines from Ameren and other utility work can be done at the 911 PSAP Center that is in the 14th Ward, very close to the elevated 11th. And with that, I would ask for to adopt Resolution 265.
Would you like to ask for unanimous consent?
I would like to ask for unanimous consent for Resolution 265.
Hearing no objection, Alderman, you may proceed.
Thank you, Madam President. I move to adopt Resolution 265.
It's been moved by the Alderman from the 14th, seconded by the Alderwoman from the 10th, that we adopt Resolution 265. Is there any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carries.
Resolution number 226, opposing Missouri State Bill 1586 and supporting the continued local administration of solid waste management district. Whereas the city
Madam Clerk, we don't need to read the full resolution.
Okay, okay. Resolution number 266, opposing Missouri State Bill 1586 and supporting the continued local administration of solid waste management.
Alderwoman from the 1st, you're recognized on the first reading of Resolution 266.
Thank you, Madam President, members of the board. I move to send Resolution 266 to the Public Infrastructure and Utilities Committee.
Second.
It's been moved by the Alderwoman from the 1st, seconded by the Alderman from the 14th, that we send Resolution 266 to the Public Infrastructure and Utilities Committee. Is there any discussion?
Okay.
Seeing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Introduction of honored guests. Any introduction of honored guests?
Okay.
Alderman from the 14th.
Thank you, Madam President, members of the board. As my honored guest today, I would like to have our newest member of the Board of Aldermen, Mr. Sidney Johnson, who is Executive Secretary at this Board of Aldermen. If we can make them all feel welcome.
Alderman from the 3rd.
Thank you, Madam President. My colleague from the 14th stole a little bit of my thunder there since actually a 3rd Ward resident. I'm hoping to introduce him as my honored guest, but I'll defer to my colleague on that. But I would like to have a few honored guests. We had with us this morning the Director of Personnel, the new Director of Personnel, Brian Light, was here with us this morning. I think he might have just left the gallery, but I'd like to have him here as my honored guest if he's still around. Also, we have several members of the Painters District Council here, and Joanna Schooler from WashU is also with us this morning. I'd like to have them all as my honored guests. Thank you.
Alderwoman from the 1st.
Thank you, Madam President and members of the board. Today, I would like to have as my honored guest Miss Emma Hain, who's sitting behind me here. She is a junior at Nearings and a member of the Youth Council. She lives just down the street from me, and I've known her since she was 7 years old. And in the time now she's 16, she has just become such an incredible leader, both in her school community and now civically as a member of the Youth Council. And I am very honored to have her as a guest today. So thank you for coming, Emma.
Any further introduction of honored guests? Any further introduction of honored guests? Seeing none, Alderwoman from the 10th, you are recognized on the approval of the minutes from Friday, March 6, 2026.
Thank you, Madam President, members of the board. I move that we approve the minutes from Friday, March 6, 2026.
Second.
It's been moved by the Alderwoman from the 10th, seconded by the Alderwoman from the 1st, that we approve the minutes from Friday, March 6, 2026. Is there any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. Report of city officials.
The report of city officials can be found in A, B, C, and D of the agenda and has been placed in a Google Drive for your review. Dear members of the board, I have the pleasure to submit the following individuals for appointment to the Board of Adjustment. The appointment of Annie Grice, James Dallas, and Carmelo DeSomi. I respectfully request your approval for these appointments. Kara Spencer, Mayor.
Alderwoman from the 10th, you are recognized on the Mayor Spencer's appointments to the Board of Adjustment.
Thank you, Madam President, members of the board. I move that we move the mayor's appointments to the Board of Adjustments to the HUD's committee.
It's been moved by the Alderwoman from the 10th, seconded by the Alderwoman from the 7th, that we send Mayor Spencer's appointments to the Board of Adjustment to the HUD's committee. Is there any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. Anyone wish to take any bills or resolutions off of any of our informal calendars? Anyone wish to take any bills or resolutions? Alderwoman from the 12th.
Off of the bills, board bills for perfection, and put it on the perfection calendar, please.
Madam Clerk, if you could please place Board Bill 119 on the regular perfection calendar.
So noted.
Anyone else wish to take any bills or resolutions off of any of our informal calendars? Seeing none. Aldermen from the 14th, you are recognized on the motion to suspend the rules for the first reading of Board Bill number
175.
175.
Thank you, Madam President, members of the board. I move to suspend the rules and introduce Board Bill 175 to the first reading.
It's been moved by the Alderman from the 14th, seconded by the Alderwoman from the 10th, that we suspend the rules for the purposes of introducing Board Bill 175. This is a non-debatable motion. Madam Clerk, please call the roll.
Alderman Schweitzer. Aye. I'm sorry. Alderman Oldenburg.
Aye.
Alderman Cone. Sure. Pass. Alderman Narayan. Aye. Alderman Devoti.
Aye.
Alderwoman Velazquez. Aye. Alderwoman Saunier. Aye. Alderwoman Cox-Antwi. Aye. Alderman Browning. Aye. Alderwoman Clark-Hubbard. Aye. Alderwoman Keys. Aye. Alderwoman Tyus.
Aye.
Alderwoman Boyd. Alderman Aldridge. Aye. President Green.
Aye.
Alderman Cone. No. Alderwoman Boyd.
Aye.
We have 14 aye votes, 1 no vote.
By your vote, you sustain the motion of the Alderman from the 14th. Madam Clerk, if you could please place Board Bill 175 on the first reading of Board Bills.
So noted.
First reading of Board Bills.
Board Bill 175, sponsored by Alderman Aldridge, an ordinance authorizing and directing the mayor and the comptroller of the city of St. Louis to execute 2 utility easements which shall grant, extend, and confer on utility electric company doing business as Emeren, Missouri, and its agents, successors, and assigns the right to construct, operate, use, maintain, repair, renew, and or remove electric power line or lines of underground and or above ground facilities and equipment on the land described in such easements and containing an emergency clause.
Madam Clerk, if you could please assign Board Bill 175 to the Public Infrastructure and Utilities Committee.
So noted.
Reference to Committee of Board Bills.
Board Bill 175 to the Public Infrastructure and Utilities Committee.
Second reading and report of standing committees.
The following board bills were reported out of the HUD Committee to pass recommendation. Board Bill 168, sponsored by Alderman Aldridge, Alderwoman Cox-Antwi, Alderwoman Clark-Hubbard. An ordinance approving the petition and amending the boundaries of the Soccer Stadium Community Improvement District and making certain findings relating thereto, including the redevelopment area described therein, and it is a blighted area, and authorizing and directing and taking of other actions and approval and execution of other documents as are necessary or desirable to carry out and comply with the intent hereof. Board Bill 151 passed out of the Public Safety Committee. Board Bill 151, sponsored by Alderman Aldridge, President Green, Alderman Oldenburg, Alderman Narayan, Alderwoman Velazquez, Alderwoman Saunier, and Alderwoman Clark-Hubbard. An ordinance to amend the public nuisance ordinance by repealing certain sections and adding new ones to create a nuisance review board. That's the extent of second reading and report of standing committees.
Report of special committees.
We have none.
Can dispense with line item 15. Board bills for perfection consent.
We have none.
Can dispense with line item 16. Board bills for perfection.
Board Bill 66, Committee Sub, sponsored by Alderman Cone. An ordinance amending Chapter 3.160 of the Revised Code of the City of St. Louis by establishing definitions and criteria for the impact assessment of redevelopment projects as required by Section 3.160031, including the severability clause.
Alderman from the 3rd, you are recognized on the perfection of Board Bill 66, Committee Substitute.
Thank you, Madam President. Board Bill 66, as you can imagine.
You'd like to ask for perfection?
I would like to ask for perfection of Board Bill 66, Committee Substitute.
Is there a second? It's been moved by the Alderman from the 3rd, seconded by the Alderwoman from the 11th, that we perfect Board Bill 66, Committee Substitute. Alderman, you may proceed.
Thank you, Madam President. Board Bill 66 Committee Substitute, as it passed out of committee, represents a step in terms of codifying the scorecard that SLDC uses to evaluate incentive projects in the city of St. Louis. As some of you may recall, and for those of you that weren't able to participate in the committee hearing, a couple sessions ago, we actually ended up passing an ordinance that required SLDC to create an evaluation process and a scorecard that was presented to the Board of Aldermen. I was having lunch with my colleague from the 7th Ward yesterday, indulging in a little history lesson, and I think for many of you that weren't here 16 years ago or 14 years ago or 12 years ago, when we had development items that came before this board, the only thing that we had was literally a board bill. We didn't have a fiscal note. We didn't have a development scorecard. These are all new things that we've implemented as a board to try and provide a level of transparency in our process, some expectations in general. And that scorecard process also provides for some community engagement that otherwise wasn't happening as well. But Board Bill 66, essentially what it does is codifies the scorecard that SLDC created. This board bill does not, it does still provide SLDC the flexibility to change metrics and other items associated with that scorecard. However, if there are any drastic changes to the scorecard, it would have to come back for review at HUDs. And so that is a summary of Board Bill 66 Committee Substitute. I'd entertain any questions or would ask for your favorable consideration. Thank you.
Any further discussion? Any further discussion? Alderwoman from the 8th, and then I'll go to Alderwoman from the 12th.
Thank you, Madam President, members of the board. I don't have any questions from the Alderman from the 3rd. He and I did have a discussion about this bill, and he understands my perspective on it. I just wanted to share, for the record on the floor today, I certainly understand and appreciate all the improvements that have been made over the years in establishing the scorecard process. I do think that is a good addition and making sure we have transparency in development. That being said, the concerns that I have with this are as it relates to the section regarding approval and modification of the scorecard. I think we all understand when developers are going through any sort of development process, there can be changes, and there can often be a lot of changes or questions depending on how long a development project takes. If we're required to bring the committee and the Board of Aldermen, that can create an even further extended timeline for projects that we know we need to get done in the city. I think right now we're trying to make sure that we can bring good, transparent, and positive developments to the city, and we should be doing things to make that process easier, not more difficult. My concern with this piece of legislation is that I do think that particular line could create some difficulties and challenges for folks as their projects change when they do need to make changes and review and approve their scorecard. So that is my only concern with this piece of legislation. I understand the Alderman from the 3rd's intent in bringing it forward today, but with that concern, I don't think I'm able to support the legislation.
Alderwoman from the 12th.
Thank you, Madam President, members of the board. First of all, since the Alderman from the 8th brought up her concerns, I'd like to ask if the Alderman from the 3rd would yield.
The Alderman from the 3rd yields questioning from the Alderwoman from the 12th.
Gladly.
Thank you.
Alderwoman, you may proceed.
Thank you. Alderman, so did you have a conversation with the Alderman from the 8th about her concerns, and what is your reply to her concerns?
Thank you, Alderman. I did have a conversation with her. I think that there might be a bit of a misunderstanding. I can't speak to her concerns as much as I can what's in the board bill, but if I were to try and clarify, her concerns, this board bill does not put ownership on a developer or SLDC in the event that a project changes. The board bill specifies if the scorecard changes, so the variables or the attributes of the scorecard, not any specific project. It's the scorecard itself. So any of the criteria that are outlined in the scorecard, if those are to be dropped, amended, or changed, then the attributes of the scorecard itself would come back before the body, not any specific project as it relates to its evaluation within the scorecard.
So anything that was scored, let's just say if one of the scores was chocolate candy and it became vanilla candy, then that would have to come back, right?
If what you're saying is on the scorecard, it says that you have to have chocolate candy, and then SLDC decides to change the scorecard to say, no, you need vanilla candy, then the scorecard itself would come back to this body, not the project that's being evaluated by the scorecard.
And SLDC would have to have the body change it. They couldn't just change it because they think it should be vanilla instead of chocolate, or vice versa, right?
Correct. And the language in the board bill is broad enough where there's flexibility on SLDC's part to further define the attributes that are in the scorecard. However, if those attributes are to change, then it would come back over here.
Okay, and can you tell us some of the things that's on the scorecard?
I'm sorry, Alderwoman, you broke up there.
If you can. I'm sorry, I said, could you tell us some of the things that are on the scorecard?
I can. I actually just had it pulled up earlier and my browser closed on me. I have to open it up again, but happy to do that for you.
Thank you.
Just off the top of my head, some of the things that are on there are things like placement near transportation nodes, the EJI, the Economic Justice Index, and the placement or geography of projects and the kind of area of need, if you will, things of that nature. The required amount of jobs, the amount of affordable housing.
Okay, thank you. The scorecard was created to make it more fair when we did development. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay, because in the past there's been certain people that got certain things and other people didn't. And also long-term development is that a lot of people have been left out of development, North St. Louis particularly. So we were trying to make it so that things that were getting done in places that had not been done previously would have a better chance of being completed if we gave it a better score, because it was actually going to be something that needed to be done. Is that correct?
That's, as you and I have had this conversation many times over the years, yes, that's absolutely correct.
Okay, and there also, and we've never been able to do this the way we should, it was to also stop giving so much help to places that had gotten all of the help. I unfortunately have been down here at the board to remember when it was only a few things downtown. And I've watched the enormous amount of money that's been put downtown in the Central Quarter and witnessed block grant money that should have gone to North St. Louis go to downtown and Central Quarter. So it makes me have a hard time feeling sorry when people start saying we're not getting our fair share, because if we look over the amounts that have been received in certain places, then not only have they gotten their fair share, they've gotten way more than their fair share. So whenever you take something away from people who have had too much of it, they will never think it's fair. But if we're ever to do economic justice and development, we're going to have to stop giving so much to some. We're also going to have to, at some point, address our economic development depends on a lot of taking money from St. Louis public schools, which we always say we support. And we have all kind of things, TIF and other things that are not in the best interest of the schools. So I understand the Alderman from the 8th's concerns, but I don't think that our scorecard goes far enough, and wish it would be even more restrictive. And I even wish we would place some limits to say we're only going to do 10 or 15% of development or assistance in certain areas. In other areas, we're going to give 80 or 90% because they haven't had any. And surprisingly enough, a lot of South St. Louis hasn't had it. It really was downtown in the Central Court. So I understand what the woman from the 8th is saying. I just think that she does misunderstand it, and also that we have to have some kind of scorecard. And I think that we can do better than that. And I will be supporting this. Thank you.
Thank you, Alderwoman.
Any further discussion? Alderman from the 9th.
Thank you. Alderman from the 3rd, would you yield for questioning?
The Alderman
Yes.
from the 3rd yields questioning from the Alderman from the 9th.
Sorry, Madam President. Yes, I will.
Thank you. Alderman, we had a great discussion in committee about this. I think you know my thoughts, and I made the case very well that I don't think we're currently following the scorecard in the first place, that I think as we just heard from the Alderwoman from the 12th, not every member of this board is willing to follow the process that we put in place. We keep reforming things and we keep adding requirements, but when we only pass a single LCRA abated project last year, just one, if we passed any fewer incentives in this board, we would pass none. And this city is not growing. I don't know if anyone's noticed, but I think it's a question of what are you trying to solve with extra regulation and extra requirements to check in with this body, which clearly has a differing opinion on incentive use in the city.
Yeah. Are you finished with your question?
That's the question.
Okay, thank you. First of all, the scorecard is something that SLDC currently employs in their evaluation criteria. So this is not changing anything from what they're currently doing. To be clear, the scorecard itself was not part of the codified language in the existing ordinance. And so what this does is take the scorecard that was developed by SLDC and the various criteria that they have assigned, not the evaluation itself. There's flexibility for that and the definitions therein, but the capital investment, public infrastructure improvements, transit access, geography, points for minority, women-owned businesses, points for historic preservation, points for environmental remediation, points for community benefits contribution, points for commercial corridor access, points for affordable housing. And those, evaluation criteria are in place now. This simply codifies those categories and the metrics associated with them. The definitions within are flexible. We allow SLDC the opportunity to further define that as they need. SLDC, the economic development arm of the city, is supportive of this. This is not changing anything as we currently do it in the city of St. Louis. It's simply codifying our existing evaluation criteria. I would add, as I did in committee, this board ultimately has the authority underneath state statute. We do not have to abide by this scorecard. If you have the votes to pass a piece of legislation, Alderman, you can pass a piece of legislation down here. That is a fact. You can still do that if you desire to do so. What we've established as a past practice, recently, albeit, is that we want to see certain criteria and values expressed in terms of where we would like to see those incentives go. And so this board bill is simply codifying that. Now, if those metrics were to change, if SLDC wanted to drop transit access or affordable housing from their evaluation criteria, they would have to come back to us. A developer wouldn't have to come back to us for their project. SLDC, if they're changing the scorecard metrics, would have to come back to us. This is not targeting or impacting any individual project. This is simply codifying an existing practice that we have developed over the last few years since we passed the initial board bill requiring a scorecard. So, but to answer your question, this board still has the authority vested in us underneath state statute to promulgate rules related to development or pass incentives. So this is just a baseline evaluation tool is what it is. And if there's issues with the process, I encourage you to speak about those. I encourage you, and as I mentioned in committee, I'm happy to work with you. concerns. But again, when I was first elected down here, we were giving away 20 years of tax abatement on a single family home in the central corridor for 100% abatement in places like Shaw, Tower Grove South, Forest Park Southeast, Central West End, downtown. Those neighborhoods, when you're giving away the highest level of incentive that you possibly can, 20 years at 100%, how are neighborhoods in North St. Louis and Southeast City supposed to gain the attention of developers when they have a less risk investment in the central corridor because the prices are more stable, lending is more available? Lending isn't available in some parts of this city, Alderman. I don't know if you fully comprehend that sometimes. Lending is not available in certain parts of this city. When I first got elected in 2009, after the Great Recession, literally, my house was underwater. It took 10 years before I would be able to get a home equity line of credit on my home to fix things like roofs. That is a reality for many people who live outside of the central corridor in this city. So in order to attract development in those underserved, underinvested communities, it is important for us to be able to express our intent with an evaluation criteria. And we want more projects along transit. This is an evaluation criteria that's in here. So, we now have these criteria that express our values. Happy to talk about that. Happy to change them. If there's someone that feels that we need more affordable housing or more direct access to transit. But this is where we're at right now. And, I think, some of your points that you made in committee are valid, but at the same time, some of them aren't necessarily directly related to this legislation. I won't hash out all of that on the floor here, but as I mentioned, I'm happy to follow up with you and have those conversations as well.
Thank you. That's all the questions I had for you. I think I'll just I'll push back against this idea that I don't know my history in the city, that I don't know that it's not possible to develop in some parts of our city because there isn't the demand, there isn't the lending available, there isn't even the incentives available. To be clear, the highest level of incentives that our city can offer are available for parts of our city that have seen disinvestment, that have seen a hard time developing. The highest level are available for them right now. People still aren't building there. And so if we have this notion that if we just don't build elsewhere, that somehow it'll push it to elsewhere in the city, as if we're ignoring that there isn't St. Charles and Chesterfield, Illinois across the river, and all sorts of other areas where people can build housing, and those cities will throw incentives at developers to build housing there. So we're going to lose out for housing that we desperately need in the city, for homes that we desperately need in the city. I don't know where everyone in this board lives, but I live in a house that was built by a private developer over 100 years ago, and then rehabbed by a private developer in the 80s. And then I've hired private contractors to work on it over time. It takes investment to bring up neighborhoods, but the numbers don't work in our city. We are below the market on a lot of what we can charge in our rents, a lot of what we can charge in our home prices. To use Forest Park Southeast as an example of a neighborhood that didn't deserve incentives is ludicrous, because that neighborhood was on the brink of collapse just 20, 30 years ago. And now it is a strong neighborhood that's contributing to the city. I think the reform that we've done has been great. When I ran for office, people asked me on the doors, how do you feel about incentives? And I told them, I will follow the scorecard. We've done a good job of reforming this process, and if we run these things through the process and they score on the scorecard, I will follow that and I will support that. And that was an answer good enough for the people who elected me. But I was in for a rude awakening when I came down to this board and realized that not only does not everyone else feel that way, but before we can even get projects to this board to vote on them and even debate them, because there are projects that I would fight for. I would tell you the story of that piece of land and how it's been so difficult to develop. I would tell you the story of how it's not contributing to our city right now, how a piece of vacant land or a piece of land that's owned by a nonprofit that's contributing nothing to our city. We don't give 100% abatement anymore as part of that reform, but we do have lots of land in the city that is owned by nonprofit and contributes zero tax dollars to us. And so if we can't lend that air of predictability, that ability for people to come to our city and know that we're going to be a good partner for them to develop here, it's not that I'm opposed to this board bill today so much as that I'm opposed to the idea that we are introducing more regulation, more check-ins with this unpredictable body, more unpredictability in this process that will actually hurt us when it comes to what we need to do, which is to build more homes for people. And it's stunning to me that we are at this place now where we are demolishing more, especially after the tornado, demolishing more homes than we are building. And we think that we're just going to get what we want by putting more and more regulations on it. But if we pass nothing, it doesn't matter what our wish list is. It doesn't matter what our values are in that scorecard. We won't get the housing we need, which means that people will not call St. Louis home when we need them to.
I was going to go to somebody who hadn't spoken, but it looks like she's gone. So I'll go Alderwoman from the 8th, and then
She has her hand up, Madam President.
Okay. So we have two folks who haven't spoken yet that I'm going to go to first. Alderwoman from the 13th, and then Alderwoman from the 7th, and then I'll go to Alderwoman from the 8th and Alderwoman from the 12th. So Alderwoman from the 13th.
Thank you, Madam President, Board. Could I get the alderperson from the 3rd? Could I ask a question?
The alderman from the 3rd yield for questioning from the alderwoman from the 13th.
I will.
Alderwoman, you may proceed.
And so I hear what you're saying in regards to bringing this, to the forefront, added another piece to it. But I think my concern is these neighborhoods that have benefited from it, even after the scorecard, it's still not to me, and it's just me speaking, it's not helping us attract developers in our community. And that's the challenge that I'm having. And so I feel like we keep nickel and diming this scorecard. Is it a way that we could just sit down to look at it as a whole so we can get it once and for all? Because we keep coming back, and maybe I'm thinking off, maybe you could clarify. To me, it's like discouraging developers from coming in because we keep adding another step and another step and another step.
So again, Alderwoman, this is not adding or changing anything from what we're currently doing and have been doing for the last 3 years. So this board bill itself is simply codifying the existing practice. So we're not changing anything. I don't know where this narrative is coming from, but we're not changing anything with respect to the existing practice and process at SLDC. They developed this scorecard in conjunction with this body, and so we're simply codifying that scorecard at this point in time. If there are changes that are desired by SLDC or by members of this body, we can have that conversation at another point in time. But right now it's adopting that scorecard and codifying it. So this does not change SLDC's existing practice. In fact, Zach Wilson, Otis Williams from SLDC were both in the HUD's hearing. They both testified in favor of the board bill, and so I hope that addresses your question and concerns.
Okay, thank you. It's not addressing it, but okay.
Alderwoman from the 7th.
Thank you, Madam President, members of the board. Would the Alderman of the 3rd yield to an inquiry?
Would the alderman from the 3rd yield to questioning from the alderwoman from the 7th?
I will.
Alderwoman, you may proceed.
Thank you. Firstly, I just want to note that I am glad that this board bill happened, and I would just note for the record that this bill was filed quite some time ago, and I was able to have conversations with the sponsor where he expressed that part of the reason that that time period is because he was in conversation with SLDC and making sure that this bill really lined up with their current practices and was very clear that we're not changing anything, we're not adding in additional restrictions, we are essentially codifying what is already there. Internal practices. So I want to be clear that whether you vote for this or not today, SLDC will continue to operate under this scorecard as they currently do for every project. And I'm also saying that as an SLDC board member. So I just wanted to put that on record. To the Alderman of the 3rd, I just wanted to ask you to clarify the Alderwoman of the 8th question earlier about developers having to come back before us after approval. I know you were asked about that question again, but can you speak to, is there anything in this legislation that says that the developer has to come back in front of us at any time based off of this?
No, and in fact, existing incentive and development agreements generally don't have timeframes associated with them. So if this body passes something, 20 years goes by, a developer leaves that project and then comes back, they can still use the incentives that this body had passed 20 years previously. So as long as the legislation was on the books, it doesn't change anything for the developer. Now, that might be something that this body evaluates and changes in the future, but as it currently stands, no. And there's that additional level of flexibility with both SLDC and potential future developers.
Okay, so there's nothing in this bill that requires that when do SLDC, according to this bill, when do they have to come back in front?
When does SLDC have to come back, or when does a developer have to come back?
SLDC. You already clarified that there's nothing in this legislation that requires developers to come back in front of us. So if it's SLDC, that's the entity. When do they have to come back in front of us?
Yeah, thank you, Alderwoman. I just want to make sure that the developer does not have to come back to this body, period, once an incentive is passed.
Right.
Unless there are changes that they're requesting for that incentive. With respect to SLDC having to come back, as I enumerated earlier, in my conversation with the Alderwoman from the 12th, the current definitions or metrics that are on the scorecard are things like public infrastructure improvements, meaning that the project is going to enhance public infrastructure, public transit access, meaning that the project is going to be near a bus route, near a Metrolink stop. The geography, obviously, we want to try to incentivize projects in North St. Louis, Southeast City. So that, plays a factor in terms of the evaluation criteria and the points that are assigned there. Things like historic preservation. I think most of us would agree that we want to try and preserve the historic integrity of our neighborhoods. So if any of those criteria and the others that are enumerated in the board bill change, meaning that SLDC wants to eliminate them or add something in addition to that, that's when this scorecard would come back to this Board of Aldermen. It's not any individual scorecard that would come back to this board. It's the metrics that are associated with the scorecard and evaluation criteria that would come back to this body.
Thank you. That answers my questions. I just wanted to make a record because we did have robust conversation. And so I know one of the things that has happened with this is that the times that SLDC has come back in front of us in regards to this scorecard, it was to add living wage jobs and environmental impacts because that was not in the very first version of the scorecard. SLDC, who was the development entity of the city, said, we keep getting asked about this, neighbors seem to care about this, alders seem to care about this, so let's add a category on the scorecard that would give you points if you're able to meet a certain metric with living wage jobs and if you're able to talk about the environmental impact of your project. So I just want to make sure, because I think that's a really important clarification, that there's nothing in this legislation that requires individual projects to come back before us. It is if the categories on the scorecard want to be amended, SLDC has to come back in front of us. And I actually think that's good for developers because otherwise that means that SLDC or alders could just change different things on the scorecard and there's no official process for that to be codified and to happen in front of us. So to me, SLDC, if they want to change it so that the developers that we work with can have a consistent process, I think it's important that they have to come back in front of us in order to change the metrics on the scorecard. But that doesn't impact any individual projects that we as alders, are moving. So I just wanted to provide that clarification. Thank you.
Alderwoman from the 8th.
All right. Thank you, Madam President. Will the Alderman from the 3rd please yield for question?
The Alderman from the 3rd yields questioning from the Alderwoman from the 8th.
I'm a popular guy this morning, absolutely.
Alderwoman, you may proceed.
Thank you, Madam President. And yes, you are. First, I want to say I appreciate the clarifications that you've made in your remarks. I do appreciate that understanding, and I appreciate the Alderwoman from the 7th on whether developers have to come back regarding this bill. I do think that is an important piece of clarification that we get publicized. That being said, my question, Alderman, relates to your statement when you said that this bill is not necessarily changing SLDC's current process, it's codifying the existing process. Is a component of the existing process, well, actually, let me take a step back. My first question is, did SLDC participate in each of the individual components that are defined in your bill and adding those original components to the scorecard?
Yes, they did. And even prior to our committee hearing, I had reached out to James Morrow, who's one of the attorneys that works over at SLDC. There were a number of items that he had addressed in kind of the editorial version as we were having conversations around definitions, structure, et cetera, within the committee substitute. So I double and triple checked with as many people as I could to make sure that they felt that their voices were heard throughout this legislative process. And, they indicated that they had, their concerns addressed. And, so much to the extent that Otis Williams and Zach Wilson from SLDC both came to testify in favor of the bill last week.
Thank you.
During the committee hearing.
And was it a previous component of SLD's process that any change made to the scorecard had to come before the HUD's committee? Was that an existing requirement?
The requirement was that that SLDC would develop the scorecard, which they've done, and now we're codifying it. So this would now put in place a expectation that if there are changes, that those would, since we are codifying it, if there are changes to it, it would need to come through this body.
Yes, so let me just make sure I understand. So previously, SLDC worked to establish the requirements on the scorecard. SLDC did put together the requirements of the scorecard, and there was an extensive process to establish those requirements. And what your bill is doing is now saying any changes that SLDC wants to make, whether it's adding or subtracting a component of the scorecard, has to come back through the Board of Aldermen's process for review.
It's getting a little bit into the nuance of it. We left broad definitions of the components on the scorecard. And so, for instance, the affordable housing component, if we wanted to, if SLDC wanted to change that, they have the flexibility to change that from 80% AMI to 65% AMI or 90% AMI. SLDC has that flexibility within the definitions currently. However, if they wanted to eliminate affordable housing altogether as an evaluation criteria, then that would come back to this body for evaluation.
Okay, I appreciate that clarification. And I think the reason I asked that is because I think the nuances of substantial pieces of a department's processes having to come back and forth between this board is, I think, the challenge that we're getting at. And I think the Alderman from the 9th and the Alderwoman from the 13th articulated that very well, because it is hard to take a look at the development that we have being done currently in the city under the process that we do and say we have a robust swath of development taking place. I think we do need to attract more, and I think as the Alderwoman from the 13th said, even with the existing processes, we're still having challenges getting developers that want to come into the city and build. And so I think the processes need to stay clear and be clear. If we are now codifying a requirement that any changes to administrative review have to come back and forth between our body, that is not assurance that we have clarity. And if you look at other standards around the nation and other cities around the nation, they have a more administrative review process for this aspect that we're discussing right now, and that helps with development. And so I think all I'm saying, and I want to make sure everyone is clear, I have no problem with the scorecard. I understand the city has been doing development wrong for a very long time, and communities have been paying the price for that. I think codifying the definitions that we have, if that process were the proponent alone, I would have no problem with. But again, I think it's signaling to developers that there could be substantial changes when they're evaluating St. Louis as a place to build in a time right now where communities are saying, and we've seen that haven't had development for a really long time, saying we want people to build here. If we're making that unsure and uncertain, I don't think it signals that that St. Louis is ready for the type of investment we're demanding for people. I don't, but I do appreciate the clarification that developers don't have to come back, and I do appreciate the clarification that we're codifying a process that has been worked with SLDC for a very long time. I think those things are good. Again, I think it's just that nuance piece that I have challenges with, but I appreciate you answering my questions.
Thank you, Alderwoman.
Any further discussion? Any further discussion? Alderwoman from the 12th.
Thank you, Madam President, members of the board. First of all, I'd like to push back on the alderman from the 9th and speaking to what can and cannot be done in certain communities. It is a ridiculous statement. There's things that can be done. I am a living example before you probably was born what can be done in communities when people say what can't be done. I got elected in 1991. I always do this shout out. Shout out to Mayor Vince Shamel, because everybody said what could not be done, but he worked with me and his then head of CDA or SLDC or both, Christopher Grace. And the reason that we are not in a food desert right now is because we bought a piece of land and we built a grocery store that had not been in North St. Louis, which was Snooks. When he left, I went on to build the first new school, Walgreens, churches, $50-60 million worth of stuff that people said that could not be done. Strip malls, all the first in North St. Louis. There's things that can be done. It's if people in the right places put the energy into it. Besides Vince Shamel, the other mayor that did that was Clarence Harmon. Those were the two mayors that put energy in North St. Louis. And any of the aldermen that served with me during the Clarence Harmon administration will tell you, and Benice Jones-Kings, Perry May, that he did put energy into it, and we got things done. Things that they think other mayors did really happened under Clarence Harmon. But Vince Shamel was the first one to believe in North St. Louis, and it takes energy from the mayor's office and SLDC. I have been doing development since 1979. All of my projects are successful. My husband and I have built a career. I understand development, and I've done it in North St. Louis because it can be done. I'm married to a city planner. He understands it. It irritates me for people to say it hasn't been done. And so when we come back here, then I will present to you all the facts about how they stole the block grant money, how they redlined. When the alderman from the from the 3rd now, because he was the 25th for a long time, when he talks about not being able to get loans, in my community, we didn't have but one bank. I had to bring all the upper middle class black people who lived in my ward, black doctors and lawyers. We had a meeting then with the head of Mercantile Bank. And we said, you act like we don't exist here. We're here, and we're here because we want to be here. And why don't we have a bank over here? And the long story is that when they met at my house, and we got a Mercantile Bank built at Kings Highway and Natural Bridge, which is now the U.S. Bank. But people assume what cannot be done. Oh, when Vince gave that $4 million and bought that land for the Snooks that's there now, everybody said that won't work. First of all, it was all nationals in North St. Louis at the time. And so when I told them I wanted a Snooks, the people in my own ward said, well, Alderwoman, you can't do that because Snooks is not in the city. Well, I'm fortunate to have lived in the Central Quarter, South St. Louis, and North St. Louis. So I've lived all around the city, all up and down Kings Highway. Not only did we reach out to Snooks, and it does count about who you know, because my husband got a master's in urban affairs from St. Louis University with the people who were the people who ran the Snooks development department. He picks up the phone and calls them. We get a meeting with them at Mr. Clark's property at Natural Bridge and Union, which used to be the Clark place. And long story short, we're talking to Snooks about why you're not in North St. Louis. Came to a conclusion. We wanted them, and we have them. 20-something years later, everybody who said it wouldn't last, it's there. It's a grocery store there. The Walgreens recently went out of business, but it wasn't because it wasn't a successful venture. It was there for 20 years. Strip malls, schools. You can do all that thing, but it takes investment, and it takes time from the mayor's office and SLDC. Right now, I am so frustrated with SLDC, not because I can't get developers, because I got developers lined up. They know me. They know how I understand development. With this tornado, speaking to the mayor, I said to her, when we tear these buildings down, and the current mayor, Mayor the leftovers from demolition. We shouldn't be burying anything, because when we do that, when you get ready to do development, then what happens is the developers have to go back in, dig everything back up. It costs developers money and it costs time. We should be doing clean demolition, and there's a lot of demolition to be done. And I've rehabbed properties since 1979, so I don't just believe you tear properties down, but you do tear down those properties that cannot be saved or are too expensive. We're not going to spend $300,000 and $400,000 on rehabbing shotgun houses. We're not going to build all brick houses anymore, and there's a reason for that. And the people who are out there beating the drum saying, you need to put this back as all brick. There's hardly any place that builds all brick houses anymore. When we did that, we were a city that we heated property with fireplaces, and we built tall chimneys so that when the embers and the hot things came out of the chimneys, that it didn't fall on a frame house and burn it down. So we built a very large group of people who represented both either the stones, masons, or the brick layers. And so we built those houses in St. Louis so we wouldn't burn our city down. But we don't have to do that anymore. So we can build houses, and a lot of them have brick fronts and whatever, and we can build houses like that, and they're good houses. We also can build new kinds of houses. There's all different kinds, and that will happen in North St. Louis if we have the energy. We don't, and I'll speak to Otis. We get the energy when people from the mayor's office tells SLDC, put the energy here. Since the people did not come from North St. Louis except for Freeman Bosley, then they didn't put the energy into North St. Louis. Well, Clarence Harmon did too. I'll take that back. And they did not put the energy. So you didn't get stuff done. That's why I give a shout out to Vince. Because when I met him, Vince Shamu and I met about zoning issues and how to build up the middle class, middle income people that were already living in North St. Louis and always have, and stop withdrawing services. There's a reason that Black people leave North St. Louis, because we don't get anything. We don't get anything because people think nothing can be done. If you put that energy into building, they will build. And so when I was building, we had a group of people that were lined up to do more things until this racist Board of Aldermen in 2001, led by Phyllis Young and led by Francis Slay, tore up 20th Ward and put it into wards that were not doing quite as well. So now I've built that back up again. We have people waiting, but what we can't do is get stuff through SLDC. And don't get mad at the alderman from the 3rd because he says, look, we can't get loans over here in his ward. Now, his ward wasn't necessarily because of racism, but it was some other things that went on about deciding that it was poor whites that live over there. And so we're not going to put the money over there. It wasn't always a majority Black community. And so you didn't put the money over there. You put the money where you felt you could easily get the money back. The redlining articles that I have, though are not about the former 25th or the former 10th, which then became the 20th, is about how they systematically did not put any money into North St. Louis. And then when we got block grant, we took that money and gave it to the Central Quarter. We gave it to downtown. We put very little money. It was across the front pages of the Post-Dispatch. And when you take money that was meant for something else, because when we apply for block grant, we apply for block grant based on the ills of the things that were happening in North St. Louis. And then we didn't put the money there. If you do that for a bank loan, if you apply for a bank loan for 4968 Maffett Place and you spend it on 4972 Maffett Place, they can put you in jail. But this whole city did this with very little investment except for low-income housing to go to North St. Louis. So it made the Black middle class flee. And it gives people such as the alderman from the 9th that say, well, it can't be done or it's not being done. It's not being done because the energy wasn't put into it. When we have people that put the energy into it, it gets done. When you have people that know how to do it, it gets done. But there wasn't any incentive to do it because, as the alderman from the 3rd explained to you all, you don't want to hear, it's so much easier if everybody's putting the money to downtown, if everybody's putting the money to the Central Quarter. This is something the alderman from the 9th doesn't know. My husband used to work for CDA. His project was the Central Quarter. when the Strausses were building up Central Quarter, when they blighted with eminent domain the Central Quarter and put all the black people out. Go back and look in the 80s. Look at the Post-Dispatch headlines saying, we will move the black people back. When the black people were 80% and the white people were 20%. And guess what? They didn't move the black people back. They just moved white people and upper middle class people and upper income white people in, and they still never put the energy into building up North St. Louis. So then people say, well, that can't be done. Interesting to me, though, when you look at the housing being done out in Wellston, because they got together, and Wellston is a poorer community than North St. Louis, but they're building new houses. The same McBride that is building on the hill is building in Wellston, and other people have been doing it because they had people that knew that people want to live all over and they want quiet enjoyment where they are, and they put the energy out into Wellston to saying we don't just need all low income housing, we need a diverse community. But in the city of St. Louis, they have not put the energy into having a diverse community in North St. Louis. They put the energy for other places. They didn't do it in South. They didn't spend a lot of money in Southwest St. Louis either because they didn't need to. But you needed to in North St. Louis because you have been so racist and withdrew all the services or the money that was supposed to go there. And now we got these new aldermen showing up many years later with no acknowledgement of the history that has gone on and saying, well, but we're not getting stuff done. If you keep giving all the development incentives to downtown and to Central Quarter, yes, the people are going to go there. It's easier to go there. You got a whole group of people in the mayor's office and at SLDC that will back you up. It's easier to get bank loans. So the incentives were supposed to be where you could not get things done. But instead, we have taken over the incentive and given them to places that's the easiest to get done. If I had my druthers, we would give about 10% to downtown and 10% to the Central Quarter, and that's including the neighborhood that you talked about, they needed that money because they were on the edge, Southwest, whatever it is, along Manchester. They needed that money. Once you gave them like $10 million. But after a while, they don't need the money. The alderman wasn't saying that they didn't need help at a certain point, but at some point, you got to stand on your own. You can't just keep taking all the incentives that was meant for someplace else and saying, but we need this. Downtown, I get very angry when I look at that building, the Millennium Building, and the press said, oh, they have one tree growing out of the Millennium, and it must come down. It's a blight. But we live in North St. Louis, where it's probably any place that you can't go anymore, that you see all these damn LRA properties and blighted properties and things that need to be torn down. Now, we're now talking about everything except for what should have happened with this ARPA money and should happen with this RAM money is that we should put 10, 20, 30, 40 million dollars into demolishing this stuff that cannot be saved. And I have a whole list that I turned into LRA that are now in people's houses because they did not demolish them. And you do not keep people in a neighborhood by leaving raggedy buildings next to their houses so that they're scared that it's going to fall on their houses, or this hip group of people who live someplace else saying, save those buildings. I actually have done rehab of old buildings. I still will do them, but you can't save them all. And some of them have to be demolished so you can do new development. There are people that want to do development. I have 6 developers right now waiting. So when you say you get done, but you have to have a push from the mayor's office, and you have to have a push from SLDC. And SLDC takes their cue from the mayor's office. So if things haven't been getting done, it's because the mayor's office didn't want them to and didn't care for them to. And I know that because when Francis Slade, and I'm going to repeat what you said to me, Francis, came over and we did the grocery store, the grand opening of the grocery store, he said, Alderwoman, you've done so much development over here. And then he went about making sure that he tore that up. That is a thing that happens in the black community. They say, don't let certain people know what you're doing, because if they find out, they'll destroy it. There's a history in Oklahoma and Florida that when black people start to be too successful, they're destroying it, okay? They're not trying to make us have the same kind of neighborhoods that everybody else. And that's the racism that has gone on in this city of St. Louis forever. And so the new people come, and they're like dismissing it. There wasn't racism. There wasn't slavery. There wasn't this. There isn't sexism. All of those things go into it. So I did not tell you that when I met with the bank that I brought the poor people in my community, because we have those too. I brought the wealthiest people in my community because I wanted people to understand that we have diverse people, socioeconomic. We have wealthy black people, medium income black people, working black people, and poor. All the development I did, not one poor person said, I'm moving because you're building a grocery store. I'm moving because you're building a Walgreens. I'm moving because you're building strip malls and schools. They all said, thank you, Alderwoman. And they didn't move. So that in 2001, when they tore up the 20th Ward, there was only 2 black wards that didn't lose population and was where they were supposed to be. That was the 20th Ward, and then it was the 2nd Ward, which is, other than that, all of them lost because it was too hard not to be able to get things. We were working on that. But then we came in with Francis Slay, and he worked extremely opposed to that. And he didn't do anything except for low income. And it got to the place before we got to 14 aldermen, we had 28 aldermen. Most black aldermen said, don't talk to me anymore about low income, because that's all you talk about, because that's what you think is my neighborhood. And so you make that so, because you won't do anything else. You didn't try to help any developers that did anything else. And again, that goes to Vince Shamo, because he understood. We sat down and had a conversation about Vince. Hey, there's a black middle class population. He had gone to school right across the street from my house. So he understood it. And if you would understand that there's a diverse population and that you cannot build up other parts of the city, if you keep giving the city quarter and central quarter and downtown all of the money and saying, well, we need this too, you already had it. At what point is it somebody else's turn? It's somebody else's turn. When I hear, and I'm friends with people downtown and people who are constituents of the aldermen from the 9th. And when I have conversation with them and they talk to me about downtown, I say, you kind of don't want to have that conversation with me. And they'll say, you're right, Chair, because I do know the history. Okay, and I know how much money was put downtown, and I know how much money was put in the central quarter. And when we count the central quarter, that was the 7th Ward, that was the 8th Ward, that was parts of the 15th Ward, the 28th Ward, the 17th Ward, and then on the border of the black communities, the 18th Ward, the 26th Ward, because they bordered the central quarter. And that has been the racism and the ignorance of development in the city of St. Louis, so that people say, well, you can't get them. Yes, you can, but you can't get them if you're saying, well, you can build over here in the central quarter and we'll give you the same development incentives that you over here where we haven't got anything going, and we're never going to get it. So you're going to have to say no to some of the people that have been at the table for the longest, and they're never going to say, oh, that's right, that's fair. One of the things that I cannot stand in this incentive things is one that says, reinforce the city's central quarter as the dynamic heart of the region. That is a bunch of bull. You have, the reason why you are is because you have gotten all the money. You're not the dynamic heart, and you should not be classified. And I have talked to SLDC and other people about that needs to be taken out. All of the city is important. And if everybody has gotten the same attention, there were wards in the city, in North St. Louis especially, that would never have had hardly any vacancies. That would be the 1st Ward, the 2nd Ward, the 20th Ward, the 21st Ward, the 27th Ward. Those were all black, middle, and upper income black people that wanted to stay in their houses, but were ran out by the racist policy, not given loans if you want to be able to get to fix up your house. So much so that my husband and I are our own bankers now, because we got so sick and tired of every time we're trying to fix up a rehab, they act like we just got to the table, and we sitting here saying, this is our look what we've already done and got done. So we became our own bankers, but other people did not have that luxury. So they moved out. Ferguson and Florissant and Hazelwood are full of black middle income people that call me now and say, I will come back. Sharon, where are you going to build? If you're going to build middle income housing, I will come back. The other one from the 13th used to represent the 27th ward. She knows this to be true. She knows it to be true about second ward. People know it to be true about the 21st ward. This was purposeful. We had a whole thing called the Team 4 plan that planned how to destroy North St. Louis, how to withdraw services, not to give the equal services. It's been ongoing forever. So when you say what could not happen, explain how Wellston is doing that, but not North St. Louis, because the people in Wellston decided to get together and work on that. But in the city of St. Louis, all of the attention is being given to the central quarter and downtown St. Louis. And so when other people say that's not fair, and we need to look at this from a fairness point, then other people will start to say, oh, that's not fair because we only had one project. If we only had one project, and I bet you it probably was something that wasn't in North St. Louis, because the only thing they want to put in North St. Louis is low-income housing. When you talk about doing things fairly, we have to care about the entire city. We have a group of people that do not, and then they get up and speak to what can be done and need to be informed about what can be done, because it's black and white. If I can do it, it can be done all in other places. And it's not because we do not have the will from 200 or from SLDC. And right now, they're holding up projects of mine that are feasible and can be done because they haven't done anything. So if you're frustrated, I'm triply frustrated because I've been in line a lot longer than you, Alderman, from the 9th. And they still won't do stuff, and they're just finding, but they can always find a way to do something that's low income, but nothing that's middle, upper income housing in North St. Louis. And that is what has happened. And the Alderman from the 3rd is absolutely correct in saying that we need a criteria, but the criteria is not strong enough. I'm just going along with that, but it should be bring up how much has been done in the past years, how much money, how much incentives have been spent, and said, this is, you've spent your share. If you were giving this to your kids as an inheritance, you would not say, if the oldest kid has got 75% and the other kid has got 20%, that, oh, with whatever's left here, that's still something that we're going to give to the oldest and the next kid. At some point, North St. Louis, and I would say Southeast St. Louis has taken a hit, but it wasn't because of racism. I was here when people in Southeast St. Louis just wouldn't do some of the things they need to. Some of it was incompetence from prior people. But in North St. Louis, besides incompetence, it's been a lot of racism and a lot of withholding of services. So when you tell me what cannot be done, it can be done. But it has to be the will of the people in room 200. And that is not happening with the will of SLDC. This is a good start here to put this into a law. I am going to support it. If people have to go through more bells and whistles in parts of the city that have already had too much, which is the current 8th ward, that's one of those places. I don't mind that they go through extra. That's also the 9th ward. I don't mind. They should go through extra because they shouldn't be getting most of it most of the time, because they've had enough. And if they can't stand on their own 2 feet, if they're always going to have some kind of incentives, then that makes it so the places that need to be developed never will be developed.
Any further discussion? Any further discussion? Seeing none, then Alderman from the 3rd, you are recognized closed.
Thank you, Madam President. I very much appreciate the very spirited conversation we're having down here at the Board of Aldermen. I do want to, in my closing remarks, just echo a couple items. One, as my colleague from the 7th Ward indicated, if this doesn't pass, we're essentially left with the scorecard as is. So it's not going to necessarily change the process from how we're currently operating. But what codifying this does prevents changes from happening that aren't underneath the oversight of the board. We could literally have a mayor come in, 3 years, 2 years that wants to change, or 12 years that wants to change this or get rid of it, or, add things to it that are completely onerous, and we wouldn't have the oversight. So this allows for some administrative oversight, and partnership between the legislative and executive branch, while also ensuring that we're living to the values that this body has, espoused over the years. I do want to, mention, because this seems to come up pretty regularly as well, that there's no incentives or no projects being done in the city of St. Louis, which in my mind is false. In the 3rd Ward and my colleague from the 7th Ward, we were just talking, we have, many projects that are happening in our ward, partly because these reforms have taken place. We have the scattered sites plan with Marquette Homes and Lutheran Development Group, the arcade building on South Grand, Graveway and Grand, which has been vacant since I moved into the neighborhood 20 years ago, is finally being rehabbed. We have the DeSales project on the 5300 block, 5400 block of Virginia. There has been a preponderance of vacant buildings down there. When I first got elected, the 5300 block of Compton was going into foreclosure, an entire city block going into foreclosure during the Great Recession. DeSales Housing Group stepped up, bought that block, and now they've purchased the 5300 block of Virginia that used to have a Family Dollar that's now closed. We worked with them to get LIHTC credits from the state. We worked with them to get incentives from the city. They're going to be tearing that building down and building a brand new 3-story mixed-use development along that corridor. They've also got contracts on another several properties around that site that would be included in that development project. That likely would not have happened if it weren't for these incentive reforms that we've implemented over the years. I also have St. Joseph's Housing Initiative that's doing projects, often without the benefit of incentives, because they're relying upon community to pitch in and volunteer and donate to do affordable housing in my ward. Projects are happening in the city. Whether or not we choose to, as a body, incentivize projects that align with our values is what we're talking about. I have been on this floor many, many, many times talking about incentives and various projects. I have voted for projects in the Central Corridor, in the Central West End, in Forest Park Southeast, on the Hill, in Soulard. I've supported certain projects. I've been very clear about projects downtown. There is a need for incentives downtown. That AT&T tower, the 1 million square feet of office space that used to pay us taxes, millions of dollars in taxes that no longer does, yes, we should work to get a development project there. The Millennial Hotel, which is currently being razed, that's being razed, demolished. That's another site that I've been talking about for years. That was bought by a private equity group, I believe, and at one point in time had Japanese owners, that chose to close it, chose not to invest in it, sat on it for whatever reason. We've talked many a times about the Railway Exchange building downtown, another large building that's completely vacant. Vacancy is a blight on all of our communities, and we need to work to address it. I have been 100% committed to addressing vacancy in this city. We worked in the state legislature to get laws passed that allow neighborhood groups to sue private landowners to make improvements to their property, or the neighborhood has the option of getting a developer to do those improvements themselves and put a lien on the property. We do have a lot of work to deal with vacant properties in this city. It is a blight on every single neighborhood in our communities. This board bill simply codifies the values that we want to espouse as a city and provides a transparent process for doing so. Any one of us can operate outside of that process, as I've mentioned in committee and here. However, I think that this has provided a level playing field, and I would ask for your favorable consideration on Board Bill 66 committee substitute.
It's been moved by the Alderman from the 3rd, seconded by the Alderwoman from the 11th, that we perfect Board Bill 66 committee substitute. Madam Clerk, please call the roll.
Alderwoman Schweitzer. Alderman Odenberg.
No.
Alderman Cone.
Aye.
Alderman Narayan. Alderman Devoti.
Aye.
Alderwoman Velazquez.
Yes.
Alderwoman Saunier.
Aye.
Alderwoman Cox Antwi.
No.
Alderman Browning.
No.
Alderwoman Clark Hubbard. Alderwoman Keys. Alderwoman Tyus.
Aye.
Alderwoman Boyd.
No.
Alderman Aldridge. President Green.
Aye.
Alderwoman Velazquez.
Aye.
Alderwoman Keys. We have 11 aye votes, 4 no votes.
By your vote, you sustain the motion from the Alderman from the 3rd to perfect Board Bill 66 committee substitute.
Board Bill 155, sponsored by Alderwoman Cox Antwi, Alderman Aldridge, Alderwoman Keys, Alderman Browning, Alderman Cone, and Alderwoman Clark Hubbard. An ordinance approving the petition to establish a community improvement district, establishing the downtown St. Louis Sports and Entertainment Community Improvement District, finding a public purpose for the establishment of the downtown St. Louis Sports and Entertainment Community Improvement District, and containing a severability clause.
Alderwoman from the 8th, you are recognized on the perfection of Board Bill 155.
Thank you, Madam President. I move to perfect Board Bill 155.
It's been moved by the Alderwoman from the 8th, seconded by the Alderman from the 14th, that we perfect Board Bill 155. Alderwoman, you may proceed.
Thank you, Madam President. Members of the board, Board Bill 155 would allow us to establish a community district in the form of an entertainment district in downtown St. Louis. As it was just mentioned by our robust discussion and in the Alderman from the 3rd's closing remarks, there are a lot of great opportunities happening in our downtown fabric. And actually, just last year, our state established a new form of a community improvement district in the body of an entertainment district for specifically in downtown areas. So myself and Alderman Aldridge, who also represents a good chunk of the downtown community, received a petition to establish this form of entertainment district in our city footprint. And what the entertainment district would do would allow us to access state funds. So there would be no city funds, no sales tax or property tax imposed in this district. It would allow us to access state funds from the Department of Economic Development to do things like improve public safety, improve lighting in the downtown community, establish planters and things like that to help support major events that are coming to our downtown in the form of, as we just saw, Olympic trials or things of that nature. So I think this entertainment district will be a great asset to the downtown community. And again, what I think is the best part of that is that St. Louis residents and St. Louis taxpayers will no longer have to bear the cost of making sure that we can sustain these major events alone, because state dollars will be coming into our city, helping us actually do the work. And I know we don't often get a lot of support from the state. So again, I think this is an innovative way that we can access those resources. We did have a robust conversation in the HUD's committee about this bill. We had a number of community members come and test in favor of establishing this district. So I would just ask for your favorable consideration and support of Board Bill 155.
Any further discussion? Alderman from the 14th.
Thank you, Madam President, members of the board. I rise in support of Board Bill 155. As the Alderwoman from the 8th said, this is a really exciting moment, especially to see legislation that comes from Jefferson City that typically is trying to hinder or hurt St. Louis. But what they passed last session was to create these main streets in downtown corridors. So while St. Louis will be able to tap into it, this will help other main streets and downtown corridors throughout our state with the legislation that they passed. But St. Louis is tapping into creating one that will run east of Jefferson all the way downtown. What's really great about, I guess, this SID, most SIDs are a sales tax either on property or 1% sales tax, I forget the other way. But this will be no cost to residents. It will not cost the residents anything. We will actually be able to tap into funds from the state that will be able to then trickle down to help with different programs or different things such as like security, beautification, as we have the Olympics coming in 2029. We want to continue to make sure that we support our entertainment districts in the area. So I appreciate being able to work with the Alderwoman of the 8th on this and her being the co-sponsor. And I think this is a really good piece of legislation that will benefit downtown, but hopefully expand out with those dollars to be able to help with other. So thank you. And it would also help a little bit of the elevated 11th. So thank you.
Any further discussion? Alderwoman from the 1st.
Thank you, Madam President, members of the board. There was a really great discussion on this in committee, and I just wanted to be added as a co-sponsor. I had meant to do that then, but didn't, so thank you very much.
Madam Clerk, please make note of that.
So noted.
Any further discussion? Any further discussion? Seeing none, Alderwoman from the 8th, you're recognized to close.
Thank you, Madam President. Again, I would just like to thank the Alderman from the 14th for his remarks and also his partnership on this legislation. Again, I do think this would be a great value add to the entire St. Louis community. We know lots of folks from across our wards come into downtown for these types of events. So again, it will just be a huge benefit to allow us to be able to make sure that experience when tourists, community members, and most importantly, St. Louis residents are coming downtown, that they can feel safe and they can have a beautiful and vibrant experience. And with that, I close. Or ask for your favorable consideration of Board Bill 155.
It's been moved by the Alderwoman from the 8th, seconded by the Alderman from the 14th, that we perfect Board Bill 155. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carries.
Board Bill 161 Committee Sub, sponsored by Alderwoman Schweitzer, Alderwoman Keys, Alderman Cone, Alderman Browning, Alderwoman Clark-Hubbard, Alderman Devotie, Alderman Aldridge, and Alderman Narayan. An ordinance recommended by the Board of Estimate and Apportionment amending certain ordinances by reappropriating certain amounts specified here, $5,464,157.84 for water infrastructure replacement and repair, and containing an emergency clause.
Alderwoman from the 1st, you are recognized on the perfection of Board Bill 161 Committee Substitute.
Thank you, Madam President and members of the board. I move to perfect Board Bill 161 Committee Substitute.
It's been moved by the Alderwoman from the 1st, seconded by the Alderwoman from the 11th, that we perfect Board Bill 161 Committee Substitute. Alderwoman, you may proceed.
Thank you so much. This bill was debated during 3 separate HUD's committee meetings over the last few weeks. I really appreciate the committee taking so much time. We painstakingly went through line by line of the funds to be reallocated from previous ARPA allocations to revenue replacement for water, which is a Treasury allowed change that we can make to ARPA now after the end of the 2024, December 31st, 2024 deadline. So that is why this bill is in front of us and is possible through ARPA guidelines. And I think we have talked as much as we need to about why water is important, so I won't belabor the point, but it is a really crucial investment to make in our water infrastructure to allow this money to go there. So I'm happy to take any questions, and I appreciate your time.
Is there any discussion? Alderwoman from the 12th.
Thank you, Madam Vice. Not Madam, sorry. Mr. Vice Chairman and members of the board. My discussion is that I'm glad we're doing this. It's real hard for me to vote for this because the key sponsor was one of the people that was not going to be supportive of what we should have done in the first place with a lot of this ARPA money, which should have gone to water infrastructure. She did admit that she made a mistake on her last bill. But I come from members of the board that when you make a mistake and somebody else was the person trying to get you to do it, that you acknowledge, this wasn't really my idea, this was somebody else's idea. From the beginning, I tried to get people to hear about that we needed to address our water infrastructure. We spent a lot of money on things that I think that could have been put aside. And holistically, there's no other thing that's so more important in the city of St. Louis than water. If you go from the chain of Roxbridge to down to Crondelet, everybody in the city of St. Louis needs good water, and we've been very lucky to have, well, we're not lucky because we had good people who worked on it, but we have good water. We have a lot of problems. This $6 million is not, or $5.5 million, approximately $1 million, is not going to be the money that we need. I will say if we ever get a chance to get a big chunk of money like we did with the ARPA funds, that we really take note that holistically. There's hardly anybody should be able to fight to say that water is not what we should have done, and we should do in the future if we get a big chunk. It's again, it's hard because we're addressing water now, but we have not addressed anything about demolishing buildings in North St. Louis that the people have been putting up for a long time. So I'm going to vote for this. I'm going to support it because I always have supported that we do water. But we really need to find a different way, maybe a bond issue or some other things to really address our water system and to go about repairing it in a holistic way so that one day that we don't wake up and we have a problem that we cannot solve with Band-Aids, because this is a Band-Aid, but it's better than nothing at all. And we really wasted an opportunity back when we got the money in 2021 when we did not put a substantial chunk of money aside for water and then try to match it with some kind of bond issue. We would have had a wonderful opportunity to fix the water problem, but you couldn't. Some of the very people leading it now, you could not get them to even acknowledge that that was something that should have been done. And sometimes that's what happens when you're new and you think you know everything and you don't, is that you actually then don't listen to good counsel, and then you have to come back and bring something that should have been done in a better way. But I am going to support it. Thank you.
Any further discussion? Any further discussion? Alderman for the 14th, are you up or? Okay, just checking. All right, then Alderwoman from the 1st, you are recognized to close.
Thank you, Madam President, members of the board. I renew my motion.
It's been moved by the Alderwoman from the 1st, seconded by the Alderwoman from the 11th, that we perfect Board Bill 161 committee substitute. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
Aye.
Motion carries.
Board Bill 167, sponsored by Alderman Aldridge and Alderwoman Cox Antwi. An ordinance amending ordinance number 68481 to create a limited exemption for convention facilities within the city of St. Louis for certain private events or trade shows. This exemption applies only under specific circumstances and is intended to allow flexibility for convention-related activities while maintaining the overall purpose and enforceability of existing regulations, including the severability clause.
Alderman from the 14th, you are recognized on the perfection of Board Bill 167.
Thank you, Madam President, members of the board. I move to perfect Board Bill 167.
It's been moved by the Alderman from the 14th, seconded by the Alderwoman from the 8th, that we perfect Board Bill 167. Alderman, you may proceed.
Thank you, Madam President and members of the board. Board Bill 167 will be amending Ordinance 68481, which was passed to regulate where non-smoking is. What we're trying to do, and I want to just be clear because I know my colleagues and others have been receiving a lot of emails on this. What we're doing is we're giving an exemption to exempt out, be able to bring in a private event that we're looking at is a premier cigar convention that this convention center has been trying to get to the city of St. Louis for the last several years. Unfortunately, there was a hiccup because of the Non-Smoke Air Act that was passed, has a convention center in there. This is not to allow ongoing smoking in the convention center on a regular. This is a one convention that we're looking at. In the bill on page 2 of 3, and I want to thank Brad Dean from Explore St. Louis that made sure that there's going to be a lot of protocol and a lot of things to make sure that the smoke is mitigated. So on page 2 or 3, they talk about some of the safety hazards that will be, or the safety precautions that would be put in place. Looking to install temporary as well as permanent ventilation systems. These are the same ventilation systems if, like, you go to a Stanley Cigar or a cigar bar, or if you go to a private club where they smoke, they install these ventilation systems so that that smoke does not seep out to the public. As well as what's really unique about the convention center, each room has their own ventilation system as well. So room A has its own ventilation system from room B has its own ventilation system from room C. And these will all be physically separated from smoking permitted areas to non-smoking permitted areas. There's also some safety precautions that we're going to put in there to make sure that there's clear signage notifying attendees, and workers of the smoking permitted areas. And then one of the things I think that is extremely important is the convention center is going to have the ability for workers to be able to opt out. So if workers do not want to work this convention because of either health reasons or that they don't like, smoking, that this won't be a forced opportunity that they would have to work. We haven't got it yet, but this is the first step to bringing that convention here. If that convention were to come to the city of St. Louis, we're looking at over 1,200 jobs. We're looking at a 4.2 economic impact within the St. Louis region, as well as $465,000 just in city tax revenue based off this one convention that will bring over 5,000 people. So again, I want to be very clear. This is raising the exemption to bring this one private event. This will not be an ongoing thing that the convention center has. And it's been great to be able to work with Brad Dean to try to figure out, how do we bring in more unique conventions that can not just benefit St. Louis, but benefit our region. I'm not into cigars, but I do go to Stanley's off Washington, and it is a crowd of people that really take on these premier cigars and really get engaged and involved. They do this in Vegas, they do this in New Orleans, and they do this in other cities. So what we're trying to do is make sure that we are part of being able to be part of what I think is a really exciting convention, and to bring in, again, we're talking about 4.2 million in the economic impact in this region and just 400-some thousand for city revenue taxes. So with that, I will open up to any questions from my colleagues.
Any further discussion? I'm going to go Alderman from the 3rd and then Alderwoman from the 11th. Alderman from the 3rd.
Yeah, thank you, Madam President. I voted against this in committee. I was the sole no vote in committee on this. I'm not going to take up too much time, but I was I think maybe possibly with the exception of I can't recall if the Alderwoman from the 12th was down here when we debated this or not. I think it might have been her predecessor, Charles Quincy Troop, that was down here. But I was here when, at the time, Alderwoman Cruson had introduced the Smoke-Free St. Louis Act. We spent hours debating this particular piece of legislation on this floor. It was probably one of the most contentious debates that we've had in my time down here. I definitely would put it in the top 10, if not the top 5. And as someone who has always advocated for these public health measures, I think I joked in committee, my mom used to joke with me that my first words were stop smoking. My mom was a lifelong smoker and passed 10 years ago from lung cancer. It is really disheartening. I understand that this is, motivated by business and by wanting to get tax dollars and revenue off of a particular convention. There is no amount of filtration systems that are going to take out the carcinogens that are in the air that are created by this. As someone who grew up with smoking sections in restaurants, there is no amount of air conditioning, filtration, et cetera, that were in those that would prevent that from getting into the non-smoking section. Even today, with the legislation as we passed it in the Smoke-Free St. Louis Act, the casinos are exempted, along with a couple other businesses. I don't know how many of you have been to the casinos, but you can still smell the cigarette smoke in those casinos when you're there. You still smell like it when you walk out of them. And they have millions and millions of dollars of filtration systems that were a requirement of Smoke-Free St. Louis. I don't see a public entity like the convention center being able to pay that kind of money for filtration systems. It doesn't matter how much charcoal you put in the air, it takes time. And there are still carcinogens. And I appreciate that there's an exemption in here providing for the care of employees. But those employees are often low-wage workers and aren't generally able to take time off. And if they do take time off, it's not paid time off. And, I still have concerns for them. I would ask that my colleagues give some serious consideration whether or not this is something that they want to espouse as a value for the city of St. Louis. And with that, I close.
Alderwoman from the 11th.
Thank you, Madam President, members of the board, and Alderman Cone. My condolences on your loss, even though it's been some time. It's no small thing to lose a mother. I am in favor of this bill, and here's the reason why. I can appreciate that there are people who choose, and right now cigar smoking is trending. I believe I have 4 or 5 cigar bars currently operating in the elevated 11th ward. I support people's right to choose. And this is a one-day event. As the alderman from the 14th stated, my email has been inundated with people sending emails about Board Bill 167. I appreciate them reaching out, but I want people to really hear what was stated. This is not an ongoing event. It's a one-time event, or may even be an annual event. The measures that they could take, they are taking advantage of that in order to be able to conduct this event in the safest way that they know how. Again, I support people's right to choose. I am not a cigarette or a cigar smoker. In fact, my addictions are very small. I'd say food is my one impediment. So trying to get that under control. But to me, this being a single event, the people who are coming to that event and the people who would be able to work at that event have the ability to choose. So I will be supporting. Thank you.
Alderwoman from the 12th.
Thank you, Madam President, members of the board. If the alderman from the 14th would yield.
The alderman from the 14th yield to questioning from the alderwoman from the 12th.
Yes.
Alderwoman, you may proceed.
Alderman, thank you for answering questions.
Yes, ma'am.
So as I understand it, the people who have the convention, the cigar, what is the convention called, by the way, so I can get it correct? Do you know?
Yes, ma'am. So this would be, the event name is the Premier Cigar Association.
Okay. So the Premier Cigar Association, have they refused to come to the city of St. Louis because we have a restriction on smoking in the convention center? Is that is that something that they actually told us that they would not come?
Yes, ma'am.
We did not remove that clause?
Yes, ma'am. So the marketing director of the convention center talked about this kind of a little bit in the convention or in the committee hearing. They can't come because of that exemption that we have that does not allow smoking. They would like to, one, sell cigars in its association, so it's not just like a one company. We're talking about cigar companies throughout the whole region, but due to that exemption that we have, they have not been able to come. They continue to go to like Las Vegas, New Orleans, and other cities. So with this, to your question, yes, ma'am, they're not able to attend because of that exemption we have.
So the exemption is that, I want to understand it. So they want to come and be able to, could they sell cigars if they didn't smoke them at this convention?
I think they probably could sell them.
So what they really want is an exemption to be able to smoke.
Yes, ma'am.
Arena. Okay.
To be able to, also try.
Mm-hmm. Go ahead.
I was going to say to be able to try the cigar. So, like I say, I'm not a cigar smoker, but I've been at Stanley's, and I guess people they kind of taste it and then they want to try it. So it's to be able to try it to know if they want to not just buy one cigar or like to be able to buy the box.
Thank you.
Yes, ma'am.
I want to thank my there's a gentleman that was, when I was growing up, my sister and I always wanted to try things. So there was a guy we called Papa, and we wanted to try. He smoked cigars and drank beer. And he let us drink just a little bit of beer and smoke cigars. And I want to thank him because that was my lifelong addiction to not smoking anything or drinking anything. Okay, so I'm addicted to not doing those things. I want all the people that send me emails. You don't ever have to send me anything, an email about smoking. I will never, ever vote for anything that allows smoking on our property, because I was one of those people when I was an attorney at the public defender's office. I was calling Freeman Bosley Sr., who was the advocate for non-smoking, and encouraging him and saying, what do you need me to do so I can help you? And we worked very hard, even before the Alderman from the 3rd was here. When I got over here in 1991, we worked on removing smoking from the building. No matter how you try to do it, and I don't care if it's weed, cigarettes, a cigar, smoking is harmful. When you say that people who work at a convention center can remove themselves, most people who are working people are not going to remove themselves for a job. I am opposed to us changing one iota of our smoking prohibition because we work so hard to get it. And what I don't like is that they can sell their product, but they want us to change our entire law for them. If we do that, then somebody else is going to come along and say something else. And are the cigarette people going to come along and say, hey, you're letting the cigar people? And so that's a rabbit hole I don't want to go down. I wouldn't want to go down for anybody. I think I do believe people should be able to smoke. I think they should have to wear a bubble so that all the smoke goes in their lungs and don't share it with me. I don't go places where they allow smoking. I don't allow smoking in my cars. Our buildings have just now, my rental property has now become smoke-free. I don't allow it on my property. I don't care if you're a grandparent, great-grandparent, whoever you are. It is a health matter that we should address. For that reason and others, I am not going to support this bill. I think it is wrong for them to ask us to change our laws. And again, as I said, when you change it for the cigarette people will come and somebody else will come. And then you don't have a law that's in the best interest of the health of the city of St. Louis. And some things you just don't want to encourage anyway. I've said on this floor before that Brandon Bosley is the reason that we changed our mind as a Black Caucus about weed or marijuana. But one of the still concerns I had was that about the smoking, not so much about the gummies and everything else, is about the smoking. It is a health matter that we should not go down that hole. And if we do, we're on the way to eradicating it. And people can smoke all they want to. They can go back over to their rooms, but they should not be able to smoke at the convention center for any rhyme, reason. And for that reason, I encourage other people to think about, are we going to then let the cigarette people, because if we don't, will they then sue and say, why do you let the cigars and not the cigarette people? It's all a health problem, and we should be concerned with keeping our ban on non-smoking. Thank you.
Alderwoman from the 8th.
Thank you, Madam President, members of the board. I first would like to thank my colleagues for all of their remarks and perspectives. I certainly understand why this is an important discussion that we have and that we should take seriously. I would like to reiterate just a couple of points that the sponsor mentioned about this bill, so to make sure that we're all clear about what it does and doesn't do. The bill is not repealing by any means the Clean Air Act that we currently have in the city, nor do I think it is changing the standards that we've set for the importance of why we don't have indoor smoking in many components of our city. It is just a bill allowing an exception for a one-time event in one portion of the convention center that is strategic to allow the city to be able to compete for this convention. It's not necessarily that the convention organizers are asking us to change our law to come to St. Louis. They do have other options in other cities that they can go to, but the folks that Explore St. Louis really feel like St. Louis does have a good ability to compete for this convention, but for this aspect that exists in our current law. So I think that is the only reason why we're bringing it here today. And I want to be clear, as someone who also, has family members that struggled with smoking addiction, I know that smoking is a challenge and is a serious public health risk in many of our communities. And so I don't make this decision lightly to support this legislation. That said, I think that as elected officials, we have a delicate balance to bear of being good stewards of information for public health and also making sure that we can make practical, applicable decisions for our city. To my knowledge, and I know I wasn't a member of this body when this law was created, it was created with certain exemptions in certain areas, like one grandfathering in existing businesses that do have cigar and indoor smoking and allowing the exemption for the casino so that they can operate and do business and compete. So our law was passed with certain carve-outs to allow the city to be able, and businesses in our city to do certain aspects to still allow them to conduct business. I think what this board bill is doing is something similar to that spirit, which again was done when we established the original act, but it is not changing the intention or the message that we're sending to residents, which is that we understand the public health risks of smoking, and we're just trying to strike that delicate balance. So I do support this legislation for that reason. I think it was tailored with great taste and respect for the existing act, but also making sure that St. Louis is in the best position on a business aspect to be able to compete like we've done in similar decisions for this act.
Any further discussion? Any further discussion? Seeing none, Alderman from the 14th, you're recognized to close.
Thank you, Madam President.
Excuse me, I had my hand up.
Apologies, Alderwoman from the 12th. It just popped up for me. Alderwoman from the 12th.
Okay, I'm sorry. If the Alderwoman from the 8th would yield.
The Alderwoman from the 8th yields to questioning from the Alderwoman from the 12th.
Yes, ma'am.
Alderwoman, you may proceed.
Thank you, Alderwoman. As I said, I was once the people who were sending over, we didn't have email then, but I was calling Alderman from the 3rd Bosley about the smoking around City Hall. Municipal courts used to be across the street when I was an attorney with the Public Defender's Office. And so people would be all outside smoking. You couldn't walk through without going through smoke. And so I called him often about it. And when I got over here, I worked with him. Do you anticipate then that if we allow for cigars, is the next step cigarettes? Is that the next exception? And if not, why not?
I don't think necessarily, ma'am. Again, the bill says that it's for certain events and certain activities. I don't think, I'm not aware of any cigarette conventions that want to try the cigar, which would require you to light it and smoke it on the floor. But that would only take place within the trade floor. Yes, ma'am.
And that would be in the trade floor. And so what are the things, and I'm asking these questions because I'm not going to vote for it because I said I'm very anti-smoking. But I thought I heard the Alderman from the 14th say that something about there was a filtration system. Would that be for the whole floor, or is there going to be some kind of smoking booth or something like that?
My understanding and what they presented to us in the committee is that the convention center is able to filter the air and lock the air within the trade show floor so that if there is an employee or attendee that doesn't want to be in the smoking hall, they can still walk around in other areas like exhibit halls or in the main hall of the convention center without having to breathe that air. So that is the filtration system that already exists within the convention center. And so it's not like the whole entire convention center would be inundated with that smoke. They can segment it off, is what they explained.
So there wouldn't be booths. It would be the entire convention center.
No,
correct?
ma'am, not the entire convention center. So in the main auditorium, which is the trade
but wherever
show floor.
they're having the convention. I'm sorry. Why wouldn't they segment it off into a booth or smoking booth or something like that, where if you want to try it, you could try the cigars like that?
I'm not sure, and I'm not familiar with necessarily how trade shows always set up. I think that would be a good question for Brad Dean at Explore St. Louis if they were able to have booths on the floor, but that is not something that I think typically happens because when you go to a convention, you're going from stall to stall, I believe.
I understand what you're saying, and you could have booths at the convention where if people want to try cigars, they can go into the booth, which would be a lot less intrusive. Because if I'm one of the employees walking around on the floor, then I don't want to have to try to avoid cigar smoke. I don't want to even smell it because it makes me sick to my stomach to smell it. So I wouldn't even want to smell it. But if you were going to try to limit it, it would seem like you would limit it more by booths placed strategically around the floor so that more than one vendor could go in there and they can try. But okay, you say you didn't have that information, and you don't anticipate that there would be any other kind of smokers. Would we then allow people who are selling marijuana to have a marijuana convention and then have smoking of marijuana on the floor?
No, ma'am, I don't think that's something that's currently allowed for the city, nor something that Explore St. Louis has been approached about, to my knowledge.
Why isn't it currently allowed?
Well, again, I think I have never heard of that type of convention taking place. I believe the state has current restrictions on marijuana use that would supersede ours. That is just my understanding. I'm not sure.
And originally we didn't allow smoking of marijuana in the city. Law to change. I'm just trying to explore how many things do we change for one event, and is it important to change our laws to accommodate one event? You talked about that they allowed for the casinos. I was here before we had casinos. And once we got casinos, big mistake for a lot of us, because it put a lot of people out of business that were down on the landing, which we anticipated it would. Talked about that. But also, if you ever been, and I've only been, when they first opened, they invited all the members of the Board of Aldermen. I went there, and that was maybe one. I've been twice since, because I cannot stand the smell. The smoke is everywhere, and they should not have allowed it. And sometimes we pursue money at the expense of health, and that's something that our values hopefully are changing over time as we talk about green energy and things like that, that hopefully we are pursuing, that we want healthy people. And more insurance companies are looking to not even insure people who are smokers, which is also telling us something about what we should be doing. And people who cigars or dip snuff and stuff like that have some other more health problems than some of the people who smoke cigarettes. So I just don't understand why the city will be going in the wrong direction by going and rolling things back. I think that we are correct where we are now, and that is something that should not be allowed. And again, I will be opposing it, but I just wanted to see if we had explored making it limited even more by having boots or something else. And again, I don't think that we should pursue everything. In politics, there's a saying that says, all money is not good money. And that's the same thing I feel with this particular venture. Just, it might provide money, but it's also a health risk to some people. Even though they may want to do this themselves, want to smoke cigars, there are cigar places they can go to. And so I don't think that's one of the conventions the city should be pursuing if it means changing our smoking policies. Thank you.
Alderwoman from the 7th.
Thank you, Madam President, members of the board. I would say this is probably one of the trickier bills for me, for sure. I've certainly got a lot of emails and outreach and communication. And I just wanted to make sure that I cleared up on the record, because the misinformation that was cover of the email, that this was a permanent elimination on any city smoking ban. That is not true. I just want to be clear that that is not what this legislation does. I do connect to the Alderman of Third's point. I actually had a godmother who died from lung cancer. I'm very dramatic whenever people smoke cigarettes around me. I cough really loud. I fall out on the floor. I think people should do anything with their bodies except smoke cigarettes. I say that all the time. And I'm very cautious of just kind of nicotine and things of those matter. With that being said, I also think that as a government and as political bodies, we have to consider the entirety of industries and entirety of stakeholders, and we have to try to find a delicate balance between, of course, public health and the well interest of our city and our residents, and also the realistic of being a city and the realisticness of wanting to attract conventions. These conventions are going to happen, whether they happen in the city of St. Louis at a convention center we have here is the question, but they're going to happen. And so if they don't happen here, that is revenue and dollars generated for which many of us have great ideas for where they could go that are missed. And so I just really wanted to say that I understand the struggle on this legislation. I do think that this legislation strikes, for me, a delicate balance. I was able to talk to the bill sponsor. I was able to talk to Explore St. Louis and ask a lot of in-depth questions about their ventilation system. And that was really important to me because I had a concern that if the convention happens and you're in another area, are you being forced to have to inhale that smoke? I know a lot of the inquiries that I had from residents was absolutely around the public health and public well-being. So I just wanted to emphasize that component, as well as I think the Alderwoman from the 12th idea is excellent, that, it would make sense to that made it to an area, and I did not think of that, I think that should definitely be a conversation. But I did learn that there will also be some physical barriers to designate non-smoking and smoking areas, and so I wanted to make sure that I highlight and bring that on the record as well. Also the point about the worker opt-out, I think it is, unfortunate that workers who get paid hourly wages will have to miss out on those events. But I do also think it's important that that option is there, that they're not being forced to work those events and that there are other working opportunities. So I just wanted to make sure, really for the sake of 7th Warders and folks watching this, just to provide some context, because I think there has been some misinformation. I certainly understand folks who will vote no of this period as opposed to like no exceptions. But I think for me, this bill does find that delicate balance because, again, especially given the many conversations we're having as a city, I think to leave these dollars on the table and to not explore things that we could do to make it so that for strictly these sorts of events and strictly this space with these specific requirements, that they're able to happen would be, an economic revenue loss for the city that I don't think that we should afford or just allow to go other places. Thank you.
Any further discussion? Any further discussion? Seeing none, Alderman from the 14th, you are recognized to close.
Thank you, Madam President, members of the board. First, I want to thank my colleagues for, having this robust conversation. This is, kind of where it happens. This is one of those, I think, things that we want to make sure if we move in this direction that we strike the right balance. Again, I do want to go on record and note that we're talking about an exemption for a one-time event, an event that is going to bring, I think, in my opinion, as we want to attract more and more people to St. Louis, an event of over 5,000 people and revenues that I think would be really beneficial to the city of St. Louis. As the Alderwoman from the 8th explained, the convention center is aware of taking, as they are in operation of the convention center, taking every protocol and safety measure possible from not just the current ventilation systems that they have in the hall. They're going to also go out and get additional ventilation systems, as well as make sure that there's a cleaning company and everything hired, because I think I was talking with maybe an alderman of how I think at the Missouri Athletic Club, they have this room where you're able to smoke, and they are able to turn around within 24 hours to have a wedding that same next day. So it is possible to be able to make sure that all that air that is filtered through the convention center in those designated spots. So we're not talking about just throughout the whole convention center. We're talking about it in a designated area where there will be allowed for people to sell their cigars and to be able to smoke their cigars. Again, I'm not one, but Stanley's is a cigar company that we passed a resolution here that celebrated 150 years. One thing I noticed when I go in, there is that appetite when people, get a cigar, they want to taste it, they want to smoke it and make sure it's the right thing. So I totally respect where some of my colleagues is coming from, but I do want to say that there's so many precautions that we're putting in place to make sure that, as the Alderwoman from the 7th Ward said, that we are one of those cities that people look at, that we're not one of those cities that people continue to fly over, but they think about St. Louis and they think about innovative ways to be part of the city of St. Louis. So with that, I renew my motion, Madam President.
It's been moved by the Alderman from the 14th, seconded by the Alderwoman from the 8th, that we perfect Board Bill 167. Madam Clerk, please call the roll.
Alderwoman Schweitzer. No. Alderman Odenberg.
Aye.
Alderman Cone.
No.
Alderman Narayan.
Aye.
Alderman Devoti.
Pass.
Alderwoman Velasquez.
No.
Alderwoman Saunier. Alderwoman Cox Entwee. Alderman Browning.
No.
Alderwoman Clark Hubbard. Alderwoman Keys.
Aye.
Alderwoman Tyus.
No.
Alderwoman Boyd.
No.
Alderman Aldrich.
Aye.
President Green.
Aye.
Alderman Devoti.
Aye.
8 aye votes, 6 no votes, 1 abstain.
By your vote, you sustain the motion from the Alderman from the 14th to perfect Board Bill 167.
Board Bill 119, sponsored by Alderwoman Tyus. This board bill seeks to improve a Chapter 99 redevelopment plan and blighted study for the 8111 North Broadway redevelopment area.
Alderwoman from the 12th, you are recognized on the perfection of Board Bill 119.
Thank you, Madam President, members of the board. I move to perfect Board Bill 119.
It's been moved by the Alderwoman from the 12th, seconded by the Alderwoman from the 7th, that we perfect Board Bill 119. Alderwoman, you may proceed.
Madam President, members of the board, 119 is the Chapter 99 redevelopment plan study for 8111 North Broadway in Dayton. It's a new area that I didn't represent, but the people there are doing some great things with vacant abandoned buildings. They're making them into event centers. This is one of them. It is a small event center. It's not large or anything, nothing like the some event centers, but it's small, and it hosts birthday parties, gatherings, family reunions, sometimes things like that. And the lady there, they're working, there's 4 of them right now that are going on in Dayton right in a row, and they're just doing great things, and this is one of them. And I also have an amendment to Board Bill 119 that I wanted to bring before the committee if this is the time to bring it before.
Go right ahead, Alderwoman.
Okay. Madam President, members of the board, I'd like to move to perfect Board Bill 119 as amended. It should be in your...
Alderwoman, first you need to introduce, have the amendment adopted.
I'm sorry. I'd like to introduce to have Board Bill, Amendment number 1 to Board Bill 119, introduced and passed. It is just one little word. The Alderman from the 7th, when we were bringing this before the HUD's committee, had a concern because if you look at paragraph 1 in Exhibit G of the sustainability report, it referred to a report in 2013. And in fact, we have a new sustainability report of 2025. So instead of referring to 2013, we now have the report as 2025. That is the only change for the amendment. I seek to pass the amendment to Board Bill 119.
Is there a second? It's been moved by the Alderwoman from the 12th, seconded by the Alderwoman from the 7th, that we adopt amendment number 1 to Board Bill 119. Is there any discussion on the amendment? Seeing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Alderwoman from the 12th, you are now recognized on the perfection of Board Bill 119 as amended on the floor.
Madam President and members of the board, I seek to perfect Board Bill 119 as amended on the floor. And again, that amendment was to change just the report, to update it as per the request of the Alderwoman from the 7th. To caught that mistake, we were still using the old sustainability report of 2013. And we just recently in 2025, late 2025, passed a new report. And she did request that we have that updated, and we did do that. And that is what Board Bill 119 as amended on the floor will do. And as I said, it is something that is great that is going on in Dayton. Small business people are using their own monies to try to rehab the buildings, and they have a vital Dayton ROPA that is about Dayton Association that is about trying to revitalize Dayton and to let people know that Dayton is a part of the city of St. Louis. Sometimes people don't know the extreme opposite ends of the city. Like people in South St. Louis may know Carondelet. I spoke to a young man who lives on Manchester, and when we talked about the workhouse, he said, "Oh, that's so far out." And I said, "It's right across the street from Dayton." He said, "Well, Dayton isn't even a part of the city." Dayton is a part of the city. It's a very wonderful neighborhood. It really could be, it was an old German neighborhood, so that if you enter from North Broadway, you'll see the entries to it, and the people there that are picking up to go back and trying to make sure that their neighborhood remains vital, and also to rehab those parts that have struggled are doing a great job. And this would just be one little small step in making sure that happens. And I'd ask for your favorable vote on Board Bill 119 as amended on the floor.
Right. It's been moved by the Alderwoman from the 12th that we perfect Board Bill 119 as amended on the floor. Is there a second? Second. It's been seconded by the Alderwoman from the 7th. Is there any further discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Opposed? Motion carries.
That's the extent of board bills for perfection.
Alderwoman from the 1st, you are recognized on the motion to suspend the rules for the purposes of moving Board Bill 161 committee substitute to the third reading final passage of Board Bills consent.
Thank you, Madam President. I move to suspend the rules for the purposes of moving Board Bill 161 committee substitute to the third reading consent calendar.
It's been moved by the Alderwoman from the 1st, seconded by the Alderwoman from the 11th, that we suspend the rules for the purpose of moving Board Bill 161 committee substitute to the third reading and final passage of Board Bills consent. This is a non-debatable motion. Madam Clerk, please call the roll.
Alderwoman Schweitzer. Aye. Alderman Oldenburg.
Aye.
Alderman Cone. Alderman Narayan.
Aye.
Alderman Devoti.
Aye.
Alderwoman Velasquez. Alderwoman Saunier. Alderwoman Cox-Santwy. Alderman Browning.
Aye.
Alderwoman Clark-Hubbard. Alderwoman Keys. Alderwoman Tyus.
Aye.
Alderwoman Boyd.
Aye.
Alderman Aldridge. President Green.
Aye.
Alderman Cone.
Aye.
Alderman Aldridge. You have 15 aye votes.
By your vote, you sustain the motion from the Alderwoman from the 1st. Madam Clerk, if you could please place Board Bill 161 committee substitute at the end of the third reading and final passage of Board Bills consent.
So noted.
Report of engrossment.
Board Bill 119, Board Bill 111, 136, 148, 150, 156, 159, 170, 171 floor substitute, 161 committee sub.
And 110.
I'm sorry.
I think
I'm sorry,
110.
110 and 119. 110 instead of 119.
Correct. Yes. Third reading and final passage of Board Bills consent.
110, 111, 136, 148, 150, 156, 159, 170, 171 floor sub, 161 committee sub.
Alderwoman from the 10th, you are recognized on the motion to adopt the third reading and final passage of Board Bills on the consent calendar.
Thank you, Madam President, members of the board. I move that we adopt the third reading finally passage of board bills on the consent calendar.
It's been moved by the Alderwoman from the 10th, seconded by the Alderwoman from the 7th, that we adopt the Board Bills on the third reading and final passage of Board Bills consent calendar. Is there any discussion? Seeing none, Madam Clerk, please call the roll.
Alderwoman Schweitzer. Aye. Alderman Oldenburg.
Aye.
Alderman Cone.
Aye.
Alderman Narayan.
Aye.
Alderman Devoti.
Aye.
Alderwoman Velasquez. Alderwoman Saunier. Alderwoman Cox-Santwy. Alderman Browning.
Aye.
Alderwoman Clark-Hubbard. Alderwoman Keys. Alderwoman Tyus.
Aye.
Alderwoman Boyd.
Aye.
Alderman Aldridge. President Green.
Aye.
We have 15 aye votes.
By your vote, you sustain the motion from the Alderwoman from the 10th to third read and finally pass the aforementioned bills. Third reading and final passage of Board Bills.
We have none.
We can dispense with line item 20, reported the finally passed and signed by the President.
Board Bill 110, 111, 136, 148, 150, 156, 159, 170, 171 floor substitute, 161 committee sub.
All other business being suspended, the President shall in open session affix her signature hereto to the end that these become law. Second reading resolutions, committee reports, and adoptions.
Board Bill 258, sponsored by Alderman Aldridge, President Green, Alderwoman Velazquez, Resolution 258, as amended, sponsored by Alderman Aldridge, President Green, Velazquez, Alderman Browning, Alderman Narayan, Alderwoman Saunier, opposing Missouri House Bill 3066, Senate Bill 1657, and the recent unaccountable actions of the Board of Police Commissioners.
Alderman from the 14th, you're recognized on the second reading of resolutions 258 as amended.
Thank you, Madam President. Members of the board, will the clerk read Resolution 258 as amended?
Resolution 258 as amended, opposing Missouri House Bill 2066, Senate Bill 1658, and the recent unaccountable actions of the Police Board Commissioners. Whereas the Board of St. Louis Commissioners, a body of 4 of the 5 members are appointed by the governor, has demonstrated a pattern of reckless fiscal behavior that threatens the financial stability of the city we all want to see and thrive. Whereas on February 2026, the Police Board submitted a proposed budget that exceeded the state's mandated amount of $72 million, and whereas the proposed budget included a near doubling of officer salary, which accounts for an increase of more than $30 million, which was submitted to the mayor's office with less than a day's notice before the board voted to certify it. This denies the mayor, who is the only member of the board who represents the voters of the city, from providing a meaningful opportunity to review, analyze, and respond to its contents. And whereas the city of St. Louis strongly supports its police officers and believes they deserve a competitive salary and the respect and the investment that is essential to the nature of work demands, which is why the city has been pouring a significant amount of resources into them. And whereas the police board's approach does not represent a good faith effort to lift up the officers, given that it most closely represents a power grab that bypasses the elected officials, the taxpayers, and the community partnerships necessary to make any raise sustainable and lasting. And whereas St. Louis will never be made safer by a police board that operates as though the rest of the city government does not exist. And whereas public safety is not achieved in isolation, but through streets that are maintained and give the residents pride in living there. Youth who have opportunities to thrive instead of opportunities to get into trouble. Families that are housed in buildings that are dignified and communities that are wholly invested in. And whereas it stands now, every dollar of the board seeks to take beyond what the city has budgeted and what the state has mandated is a dollar taken from the holistic approach to what makes us safe. And whereas Mayor Kinster has stated that the police board's proposed budget will force massive layoffs across streets, refuse, and every other city department, the police board's fiscal recklessness threatens the livelihoods of thousands of city employees and the services the residents depend on. And whereas on January 21st of 2026, Missouri State Representative Bad Christ, who does not represent anyone who lives in the city of St. Louis, filed House Bill 3066, which will remove all ability for the municipally ran Board of Estimate and Apportionment to deny line item transfers for the board. And whereas transfer litigation calls for police misconduct from the city to the state. And whereas on February 10, 2026, Missouri State Treasurer Travis Fitzwater stated Senate Bill 1657 which is identical to HB 3066. And whereas HB 3066 and SB 167 would dramatically accelerate and entrench the city's problems by allowing the board to hide tens of millions of dollars from the city's budget while also stripping the Board of Estimate and Apportionment of its authority to approve transfers within the police budget, eliminating a critical check of how public dollars are spent and appropriated. And whereas HB 3066 and SB 167 becomes law, the liability for the police-related lawsuits, settlements, and judgments will be transferred to the City of St. Louis, meaning St. Louis taxpayers will bear the full financial risk of police conduct while simultaneously being denied full visibility into the true cost of the department they are funding. And whereas HB 3066 and SB 1657 will grant the police board the unilateral authority to move money between budget classifications without seeking approval from any elected or appointed oversight body, a power granted to no other city department. And whereas the city has been working for several months in good faith with the Missouri Attorney General's office on a memorandum of understanding to resolve the important legal issues of representation, liability, payment, settlement authority, and other key issues, making these pieces of legislation both unnecessary and potentially counter to its collaborative effort that all parties believe is close to being resolved. And whereas the City of St. Louis faces profound and layered public safety challenges that cannot be solved by budget increases alone, they require violence prevention, behavioral health response, trauma-informed services, neighborhood investment, and the kind of trust between residents and officers that is built through community engagement and accountability, not state mandates by an unattainable police board. HB 3066 and XB 1657 make every one of these proven solutions harder by constraining cities' fiscal flexibility and concentrating decision-making power in a board that answers to Jefferson City rather than the people of St. Louis. Now, therefore, be it resolved by the Board of Aldermen of the City of St. Louis that we pause in our deliberations to oppose Missouri HB 3066 and SB 1657. And be it further resolved that this board calls on the police department, the Police Board of Commissioners immediately return to the table in good faith partners in order to help to develop a police budget that honors our officers, respects our residents, and reflects the realities of a city that must invest in all of its residents. And be it further resolved, the Board of Aldermen urges the City Councilor on behalf of the city to file for a declaratory judgment in a court of competent jurisdiction to obtain judicial clarification regarding the calculation of the percentage of the city's general revenue fund required to be appropriated to the St. Louis Metropolitan Police Department pursuant to state law. Such action shall petition the court to determine the methodology and the dollar amount constituting the required appropriation for the city's general revenue fund, and including the statutory requirements that funding shall no less be than 25% by the fiscal year 2028. Be it further resolved that we further direct the clerk of this board to spread a copy of this resolution across the minutes of these proceedings and to prepare a commemorative copy of this resolution to the members of the Missouri House Committee on Crime and Public Safety, the Missouri State Senate on Transportation, Infrastructure, and Public Safety, and to the other she sees fit. Introduced this 6th day of March 2026 by the Honorable Alderman Rasheen Aldridge, Alderman of the 14th Ward, co-sponsors, the Honorable Megan Green, President of the Board, the Honorable Daniela Velasquez, Alderman of the 6th, Michael Browning, Alderman of the 9th, Brenda Ryan, Alderman of the 4th, Alderwoman Sonnier, Ward of the 7th. That's it. Yep, that's it. Attest this day, March, as attested by.
Alderman from the 14th, you may continue.
Thank you, Madam President, members of the board. Also, thank you, Ms. Ross. I knew that was a long resolution, but I think it's really important that it be read into the record so that people that are listening back home can actually, if they don't see it online, can actually read the resolution. And why I say that is because I want to be very clear. This isn't like an anti or defund a police resolution coming from the board. I don't want that to be the narrative. This resolution is really calling for caution of what we're seeing right now with our state control board. Several years ago, citizens of the city of St. Louis voted to go back to local control. I think 2 years ago, the MAGA Republicans in Jefferson City said, we know what's best for the city of St. Louis, and they passed legislation to make our police board a state control board. And since that has happened, we have seen over several weeks a lot of concerns and a lot of problems, mainly not sure what the aspect of what the police budget is going to do to the city of St. Louis, especially when we talk about other city services. For the last several weeks, we have heard that the police board is wanting from $50 million all the way to up to $200 million of funds to be able to continue to do the work for the police department. We know, as being the budget chair, we allocate from the city of St. Louis. Majority of the budget go to public safety, but majority of it go to policing. And over these last 3 years, they have not been able to spend all the funds that we already are allocating to them. And now they're asking for even more, which is putting us in a place where we have to look at potentially other city services. What impact it's going to do to our streets department, what impact it's going to do to our forestry, what impact it's going to do to our building division. We have a board, to be honest, a board of individuals that have not been elected by the people, that do not know the ins and out of the budget process, and in making decisions that are really going to cripple our budget and hurt the city in the future when it comes to the way that we move forward. So, this is calling on a responsible fiscal impact from this police board to make sure that they do not hurt our other departments. And at the same time, there's two pieces of legislation moving in Jefferson City trying to take away even more local control from residents from the city of St. Louis. There's a House bill and there's a Senate bill that is trying to take away the power from ENA to have final say-so over transfers when it comes to this police board. At this point, they basically are saying that the police board have the full power to do whatever, whenever, and however, and that's just not how city government works. I do appreciate all my colleagues who signed on as a co-sponsor. I appreciate everyone who voted for this yesterday in public safety. It came out 7-0, and everybody that showed up to the hearing to talk about the fear and the concern and just the frustration of the mismanagement of the way that this police board is moving, and really going to hurt the city of St. Louis if we move in this direction. As we say, public safety is important, our police officers are important, but also public safety is our building division. Public safety is the health department. Public safety is having safe streets. So when we talk about public safety, it is not just giving more than 50% of our budget to the men and women in blue, which we appreciate what they're doing, but this board has no idea and no experience on how to work within the city budget. And I think if we do not speak up from the Board of Aldermen, it's going to set a very dangerous precedent. We're already, through Paul Payne, meeting the requirements that we're supposed to meet. I think it's 23 or 24%, but they're saying that's not enough. They want more and more and more, and at some point, we have to say no. Thank you.
Alderman from the 9th.
Thank you, Alderman Aldridge. I really appreciate you filing this legislation and really bringing this resolution forward for us to not only discuss, but to express our opinion. As a member, as the vice chair of the Budget Committee, I attended yesterday's Public Safety Committee because I wanted to hear testimony from the public. And what I heard was a call for us to fund our basic city services, for us to fund recovery from the tornado, and reject the notion that the state can decide how to spend our money. It is a sign of a failing democracy for a state legislature to create an unelected board and mandate that our elected board follow what they say. This budget request was not prepared with our budget director, and he and our elected mayor have expressed serious concerns about how this is going to affect our city services. It is undemocratic to mandate the compliance of elected representatives to support a budget request, and then to threaten penalties against those elected representatives for really just representing our constituents who elected us and want to see us do what's best for our city. This resolution on its own is not going to stop this egregious state overreach, but I do appreciate it being filed because when the state passed this legislation to take over our police, they didn't talk to us. When they put forward this with this unelected police board, put in place this budget, they didn't talk to us. So this is us talking to them, and this is us telling them that they don't get to decide what's best for us. And if they really do, if they really claim that this is what's best for us, then they can pay for it. If the state of Missouri thinks that it can dictate what's best for the city of St. Louis, then it can pay for it, because if this city fails, the state of Missouri is not far behind it.
Alderman from the 3rd.
Thank you, Madam President. I rise in support of this. I would ask that I be added as a co-sponsor, Madam Clerk.
Madam Clerk, please make note of that.
So noted.
I don't want to belabor, I think the Alderman from the 9th mentioned pretty much most of what I was going to say. I would just make a correction on one of the comments earlier. This wasn't an election by the city of St. Louis. It was an election by the state of Missouri that returned the police department to local control after 150 years of state control. So not only did the city vote in favor of it, but the state voted in favor of it. And then the General Assembly, in its infinite wisdom, decided to overrule, as they've done time and time again, the voice of the people on this particular matter. We've seen that with puppy mills. We've seen that with minimum wage. We've seen that with so many various issues at the state level. And, we are now going back in time. I feel like I'm going back to the future here often lately. And it's very frustrating because it is a lack of accountability. It's a lack of transparency. And when things go wrong, we have an unelected board of commissioners that has no accountability to the people. They're not appointed by this body. They're not appointed by the mayor. They're appointed by the governor. And I don't know how many times the governor is going to pick up a phone call from a constituent in St. Louis that's been involved in a crime or been a victim of a crime or had to deal with what happens on our streets. They might get a phone call back from his office. They might get a phone call back from someone in the Department of Public Safety at the state. But the governor isn't here making day-to-day life and death decisions for the citizens of this city. And while the commissioners might live in the city, they're not elected to serve the citizens of this city. And it is very, very frustrating. And I have a lot of choice words that I'd like to say now, but I'm not going to do that on the floor. But it is incredibly angering that we are back in this situation where we have an unelected board of commissioners that does not have accountability to the citizens of the city. Next thing you know, they're going to be having board of commission meetings in closed meetings, or not accessible, or at odd hours of the day and night. Whenever contentious issues come up, we literally are in a bit of a budget crisis coming up here, and they're going over the mandated, percentage that the state has put underneath us. And I just don't see how this plays out favorably for the citizens of our city. And I rise in support of the resolution here. And again, I would ask to be a co-sponsor, Madam Clerk.
Alderman from the 5th.
I too rise in favor of this resolution. And I think one of the disappointing and sad things, the fact that we're even discussing this here today, is it shows the sloppiness, the slipshoddedness, the utter lack of consideration that went into the legislation that put forward state control. We are in the position we are in today as a city, listening to our residents, because of a complete lack of disregard by Jefferson City politicians about how this structure, how this scheme would be employed. The legislation was rushed, it was made quickly, and it was done without the input or consideration of one elected official that represents residents that live in our city. I think that what makes the conduct in Jefferson City more, you used the term reckless in the resolution, but disgusting, is the idea that the same Shrewsbury risk manager that prepared and pushed the legislation leading to state control is now the one who filed first House Bill 3066, a state representative that doesn't represent one person that resides in this city. He has no law enforcement background. He doesn't sit on our budget committee, and he has no knowledge of how this city represents, but yet he was compelled to file House Bill 3066 to clean up a mess that he created. And what makes that just completely reckless is that if passed, 3066 makes unique the way in which our residents, our city, gets stuck with the mistakes made by agents and employees of the state of Missouri. There is no other, zero other situation in the state, zero, where a master, an employer, someone who has the right to control another, has zero responsibility at the end of the day for their misconduct, their negligence, any harms and losses resulting from their bad act. Zero. Zero. And what House Bill 3066 does is it creates an exception that applies to no other entity, no other corporation, no other limited liability company, no other partnership, no other individual in this state, except the city of St. Louis and the actions of the police officer. Now, I completely stand behind our officers. They must be paid a fair wage. They must be provided with equipment and resources to do their job. But the position that we're in today is that this legislation, along with what was passed this past year, pits the police department, its employees, against city residents, as well as other employees, our street workers, our refuse drivers, anybody else who's in the employ. And at the end of the day, that's truly the sad part about the situation we find our way in. That the situation was created by, the circumstance was created by someone who represents nobody who lives in this city. And what he has done and what the other outstate representatives have done have basically pitted city employees against our police department. They have put us in an untenable position, one in which there can be no winners. And it shows the absolute lack of thoughtfulness when the original legislation was passed. Whatever you think about state control, the way it went down was idiotic. And the fact that the same guy, and now I'm repeating myself and I apologize, is the sponsor of 3066, it is unexplainable. I stand in support of this resolution. I know that the folks that represent St. Genevieve County, Rawls County, and Newton County, or wherever else they would be, don't have to listen to us. But if anybody out there in Jefferson City is going to pick up a newspaper or watch a media report and truly listen to the concerns of the elected body, the folks that represent residents, simply ask yourself, how would you like it if your local county, police department, street department, whatever it would be, was told by the state of Missouri, this is what you're going to do, deal with it? You would be up in arms. And that's exactly what happened to St. Louis. So, Alderman, thank you for bringing this, and I will be voting in favor of it. Thank you.
Alderwoman from the 6th was standing first, so I'm going to go there, and then Alderwoman from the 6th.
Thank you, Madam President. I want to echo everything my colleagues have said. I want to say that same state rep couldn't even be bothered to answer an email for me during the passage of that bill last year, which I found incredibly disappointing, that in addition to all the things they've done, they can't even be bothered to answer questions from representatives like me. Alderman Aldrich, you know I support this bill. We sat 3 hours last night in front of public safety. I would ask that the budget chair and vice chair continue to call on the police commission to come to budget and to tell us, I don't know if justify is possible, but tell us about why they're choosing to do this. I do think it's reckless. I do think it's irresponsible. I also think it's completely unrealistic to present a budget that would exist in a silo of everything else that happens in the city. I know my colleagues already know that as well. And we have to think in the conversations that we're having with our residents that public safety is broader. It's the conversations that, as Alderman Cohn said, that we hear every day about safe streets, lighting, all the other things that trash getting picked up, all the other things that are part of what makes people feel safe, in addition to having police on the streets and having our employees feel safe and not be pitted against each other, which is exactly what Alderman Devotee said, that this is an untenable position. So I would ask that the budget committee continue to call on the commission to come here. I would also ask that the people who rose in support of this resolution yesterday show up at those police commission hearings too. Thank you.
Alderman from the 4th.
Thank you, Madam President, members of the board. I want to start off by saying I'm supportive of the police. I was supportive of their raises. I work with them on a regular basis. That being said, every year departments regularly ask for more money than we can give them. There's just more problems than dollars to go around. That's the way it's always been. But ultimately, the reason why I'm supportive of this and signed on as a co-sponsor is because the city needs a seat at the table when we're talking about this budget. I hear from constituents constantly, as I'm sure all of you do, and I never hear anyone ask to defund forestry or to defund refuse or to defund streets. And there's a real possibility that that's what we're going to have to do should this budget move through. Ultimately, where the budget director is and where the police board is on the budget, we're millions of dollars apart, potentially $100 million apart. I think that this whole setup here is ultimately also a Hancock violation, and I hope that as this comes to fruition that we have the city councilor challenge this and say that this is an unfunded mandate. If the state wants this budget, the folks in Jefferson City should pay for it. I don't get to tell you how to run your household, and that is exactly what's happening here. And I think it's in violation of the Constitution. So I am supportive of this. I want to thank Alderman Aldridge for bringing it. And with that, I'll yield.
Any further discussion? Alderwoman from the 8th.
The Alderwoman from the 1st was up before me.
Alderwoman from the 1st.
Thank you, Madam President, members of the board. Thank you, Alderman from the 8th. I simply want to be added as a co-sponsor. Thank you.
Madam Clerk, please make note of that.
So
Alderwoman
noted.
from the 8th.
Thank you, Madam President. I believe our colleagues all made very, very excellent points, and I don't want to belabor the points. The only thing I want to add, which I think needs to be emphasized here, is that the ask that the police department are asking us to make are truly being made in a silo. I think we have all heard and seen the request and the emphasis of the arguments for improvement to facilities and officer pay. And I don't disagree that those things need to be done. But when you ask a city to create and make a budget without consideration of any further other departments and the fiscal conditions that we're in right now, knowing that we need to recover and help rebuild a huge swath of our city, I think that's a major concern. So I just wanted to make sure that emphasis was also made, and I too would like to be added as a co-sponsor.
Madam
So
Clerk,
noted.
please make note of that. Alderwoman from the 7th.
Thank you, Madam President, members of the committee. I just really all of that have been made before me. I cannot, I don't know that I've ever seen this type of example of just a complete separation of fiscal obligation and fiscal accountability. I think that it is absolutely insane that that the state wants to control an entity, wants to make the decisions on the entity, but then wants the city to bear the impacts of that. While, I know the police board commission has come up. The one representative that we do have on that board, the mayor, has spoken and been very clear that, what is being proposed would be something that could potentially bankrupt the city and could cause massive layoffs. And when the state comes back next session, they're going to continue to have this discussion and are looking into uplifting the mandatory minimums and bypass the Board of E&A so that they could do whatever they want to do. So I only just want to make sure, to the public, I do think there are some hard times ahead. I'm not sure what the response to these actions will be, but I do hope that it gives the city of St. Louis's residents to see this type of unity amongst this board. We have very lively discussions, but the fact that almost nearly every single one of us have a grave concern about this and are really highlighting the same points. I know we have a lot of folks who are strong on the fiscal responsibility. I think there's no way that you can talk about the importance of revenue, that you can talk about fiscal responsibility and not have a critique of this legislation and not have a critique of what the state board is doing. So I just want to add my support. I want to thank the Alderman from the 14th for this legislation, and also add that I think it's really important that in any way that the city can push back, whether it is a lawsuit or anything else, I think it is critical that we not only say with our words that we don't support this and we see this happen, but we also take every action available to us to stop this, or to at least hopefully require that if they want to control it, they have to pay for it themselves. Thank you.
Alderwoman from the 12th.
Madam President, members of the board, I actually have served on this board twice with state control. Back when I got elected in 1991, we had a police board that was also unelected and appointed by the governor. It was a different board than we have now and was under some different laws. One of the things we had all Democrats controlling the state, and so they had some input on who sat on the boards of police commissioners. The Board of Police Commissioners used to have monthly meetings. You could go there and present problems that you had with the police, or just present questions or ask questions. And so although, the best situation, cities should always control their own police force and also the fire department and other forces, it was not as it is now. In 2013, I was here when we also regained control of the police, local control. I was not in favor of that because I had pretty good policing under the state control board. We actually saw the police in North St. Louis. We saw them driving up and down our streets. We had 9 districts then, and so districts were represented. And as soon as we could regain control of the police department, we continued to reduce our districts. I never see the police in my community, even though one of their super stations, which we originally called it, is located in the 12th ward and was located in the 20th ward, has been in my ward the whole time. We don't see the police anymore. And that is a concern for us. The Alderman, so I have conflicting emotions about this. The problem that we have, and the Alderman from the 4th intimated, he said about an unfunded mandate. Unfortunately, back in 2022, the Hancock Amendment was superseded by an amendment to the Missouri Constitution, and that amendment allowed for the police exception. We didn't pay a lot of attention to it at the time because it was really only applied to Kansas City, because nothing else in the state of Missouri was under this appointed police board. But in 2022, that did get passed. Kansas City actually went to court and filed lawsuits about how unfair it was. And the same things we're saying now, they're saying then. But we didn't pay attention. And sometimes you don't hear when other people are saying something is unfair, and then it happens to you. So now it's happened to us. We also do not have the supermajority that we had when I became a new alderperson. So we didn't have the checks and balances with our state reps and people like that as to who could be appointed by the governor. We had a Democratic governor and Democratic House and Democratic Senate. So it was a little different. But we didn't, to me, when we had local police control, there was a lot to be desired. The first thing that the former mayor did, and that was Francis Slay, is do a double promotion and make Dotson the police chief. He had been, I don't know, a captain or something like that. That was very unpopular. We begged him to have a police board and to set it up. They did not. That's something I don't care who it is. We should have a police board. I don't care if the state's controlling or the city, but we did not. There was a lot of things that was left to be desired, and it gave the police a chance to go up and lobby a state legislature that had changed, as well as the governor himself. So now we went from supermajority Democrat to supermajority Republicans. We also had what I thought was a foolish cry about defund the police. I never agreed with it. I understood the sentiment behind it, and the sentiment was that where there were problems and fiscal problems or irregularities or things that were not correct, that we should go in there and point those out and get those corrected. But in no place in my community did the people want to defund the police. And I think that that was silly. And I told the people who were saying that, stop saying that because you're hurting your cause. We now are at a point where somebody has a gun to our head and they don't care what we think. That's how my community felt when you tore up the 20th Ward. When I hear people talking about the new people at the board, and they don't know anything, that's how I feel dealing with this board. Exactly that, is that you have people making decisions that don't have a clue. The only thing is these people are not elected, but whether they're elected or not, if you don't have a clue, you can have seismic things that happen to a community or a city that you should not have done because you just don't even understand the impact, or you just don't give a damn, or you don't care. I am really disappointed. I was disappointed with when the governor appointed this board. It is not representative at all. There's not one single member that lives in North St. Louis at all. There are no black men on there. That's a disappointment to me. To have 3 white males is unfair. Okay, to have somebody who actually sells cars and have to hear the mayor, our current mayor, say that some people think that you have a conflict of interest. I was really proud of her when she said that to his face, not behind his back, and he didn't get to be the chair of a committee. At some point, we need to get together with Kansas City and even talk to other cities to say, look, this exception that they carved out in 2022 to the Missouri Constitution, we need to challenge it. We need to go after it and get it changed, because there should not, the whole problem, the whole intent of the Hancock Amendment in the first place when it was passed back in the 1980s is not to have unfounded mandates, not to have things where you told people what they had to do and then you didn't fund it. And so to then go back in 2022 and change the Missouri Constitution, which is that time, nobody's looking because they're only talking about Kansas City, but now they're talking about the city of St. Louis, and they could be talking about other states. I think this is something we should take it, get with Kansas City and take it to court. But we also should start talking about doing a petition to challenge the Constitution. I think the Constitution itself, the amendment, the way it was done, is unconstitutional. It only addresses the 2 largest African-American groups of people in the state of Missouri, which are Kansas City and St. Louis area. And if you will know anything about laws that we had going back to when we had this war between the states, is that laws were made about Kansas City and Missouri and St. Louis based on that we had large minority populations, and that who we were affiliated, were we not with the South, were we with the North, those kind of things. And that kind of stuff is still going on now. And I support the resolution, but I don't support it without claiming, accepting some of the city's responsibilities for not doing some of the things we should have done, or the irresponsibility of putting out there to defund the police. That just gave them the ability to go to the state and say, look at these crazies out here pushing defund the police, and we don't have any protection. I am fortunate. I've not had bad interaction with the police when I was growing up. A lot of black people tell me about that. I didn't grow up like that. I grew up in a small city. I lived right down the street from the police. I was always pro-police. The first time I ever understood that the police didn't always tell the truth, I was an attorney with the public defenders. In my first 3 cases I ever had, the police did not tell the truth. And I got not guilties, and I was crushed. I was happy to win, but crushed to find out they didn't always tell the truth. So, but that doesn't make all police officers bad. We should pay them more. I have taken the position over years. I vote no against the budget and talk about how we don't pay our city workers enough, including the police. But that doesn't mean we throw the rest of our city workers under the bus and say, okay, we're going to fund the police at all costs. I think that if the police board doesn't know it, you're making the people who really are supportive of the police look bad. You're making us look like that we're foolish to be standing up and protecting you, and you're showing us that you don't care about us as a whole. I used to tell the police all the time when they would talk to me, I can't find any place safe to live in the city. And I would say, I live in a safe place. You're not any better than I am or the other elected officials. I was very disappointed with getting rid of the residency. It's nothing that when it was put to a vote that the citizens ever voted for. They were always opposed to it. So to see that go the way of a lot of other things was a disappointment to me. If you want to make something successful, you have to stay in, you have to do the fight, you have to stand up, you have to work on it, you have to keep coming back. You get cheated, you get defeated, but you don't give up on your city. The police, you're not going to have anybody to protect. There are not going to be any people in the city. You're going to put people out of work that going to clean your streets. Oh, but you don't have to live in those streets anymore because you're the police and you can live someplace else, because that's one of the first things we got rid of was the public safety factor of it. And that was a mistake. We want the police in our community. We want to have a partnership with them. I would implore that this board not continue on their path. We actually have subpoena power. When you talk about you want to use your power, I'm going to give you a little hint now. Subpoena the board if they won't come. Send subpoenas over to the Board of Police Commissioners and have them come before the committee. We actually have that power. And if they don't come, we can send people to bring them. They should come and talk to us about why they think it's a good idea. We should talk to the police lawyer who I hear is pushing this. Why do you want to bankrupt our city? What is wrong with you that you would want to bankrupt our city? I'm not the only person sitting on this board that gets along with the police, want them to get paid properly, and I've made that statement. There are others, if they don't want to say it, that's fine, but I will. But I cannot agree with you doing what you're doing now. And I don't understand what the governor is doing. Why would you do this? I would say, Mr. Governor, please come and talk to us, explain to us. I know you've had some conversation with the mayor, but what is the point of this? Why would you go along with this kind of thing? Why would you want to take 25% of our budget? Are we also going to have to pay the fire department, which we have this reciprocity thing going on, but they went up to the state and got this. So do we spend 50% of our budget? Is that what we're going to do? This is a mistake. Why would you want to kill one of your thriving cities? We work hard in St. Louis to keep our population and try to stop losing population. If you bankrupt us, we can't pick up trash, we can't cut down trees, we can't demolish houses. Where are we going to get the funds to fund the police? Not defund the police. We won't have any money. I don't understand what you're doing. I feel really disappointed. I don't often add my name to a lot of things, but I will ask to be added to this resolution. It is a mistake for us to do this. And this is from somebody, as I said, in 2012, when they said that we should take the police back over. I not only didn't approve of it and opposed it, but my ward, which was Ward 1, then opposed it. At the same time, we opposed going from 28 to 14. And I am a supporter of the police. That doesn't mean I don't believe that they should be held accountable. I've passed resolutions about accountability to the police. And for you to want to separate the police, you're making an occupying force in our city instead of somebody who's supposed to be working with our community. And everybody who's part of that ought to be ashamed of themselves. And Madam President and Madam Clerk, would you please add my name to the resolution?
Madam Clerk, please make note of that.
So noted.
Alderwoman from the 6th.
Thank you, Madam President. I would like to make a motion to embank this resolution.
It's been moved by the Alderwoman from the 6th, seconded by the Alderwoman from the 7th, that we embank Resolution 250.
Objection.
There is an objection to embanking, so if there are other members of the board who would like to add themselves as a co-sponsor, please raise your hand and we will make note of that. All right, seeing none, is there any further discussion? Any further discussion? Alderman from the 14th, you are recognized to close.
Thank you, Madam President, members of the board. I think my colleague said it all. You know, this is about, again, just making sure that a board that's not elected by the people, a board that does not understand the road that they're heading down, is going to be very dangerous for our other city departments, our streets, our forestry, and other things that make our city safe. And I just appreciate all my colleagues and, you know, all the input that they put into this. I do want to give a shout out to the Budget Committee, because this is something we have been talking about for a while. It's something that we wanted to do as a group to send a letter, but thought it would be even more powerful to get all our colleagues involved. And I want to thank each colleague that signed on as a co-sponsor to hopefully send a message to the police board that at least this board of aldermen, from the president and all alders, we're open for conversation. There's a right way to do it, and the way that they're going about it is not the right way. So with that, I would renew my motion to perfect.
Have not made a motion yet.
I haven't made one?
No.
We just been going.
Yes.
All right. I make a motion that we adopt Resolution 256.
8 as amended.
As amended.
Roll call.
I couldn't see who the second was. Second. So it's been moved by the Alderman from the 14th, seconded by the Alderwoman from the 7th, that we adopt Resolution 258 as amended. And there's been a request for roll call. Madam Clerk, please call the roll.
Alderwoman Schweitzer. Aye. Alderman Odenberg.
Present.
Alderman Cone.
Aye.
Alderman Ryan. Aye. Alderman Devoti.
Aye.
Alderwoman Velasquez. Aye. Alderwoman Saunier. Aye. Alderwoman Cox-Santui. Aye. Alderman Browning.
Aye.
Alderwoman Clark Hubbard. Aye. Alderwoman Keys.
Yes.
Aye. Alderwoman Tyus.
Aye.
Alderwoman Boyd.
Alderwoman Boyd, are you operating a vehicle at the moment?
No, I'm parked in my car.
Okay.
Alderman Aldridge. Alderman Aldridge. President Green.
Aye.
14 aye votes, 1 present.
By your vote, you sustain the motion of the Alderman from the 14th to adopt Resolution 258 as amended. Alderman from the 9th, you're recognized to suspend the rules for the Resolution 264.
Thank you. I move that we suspend the rules to introduce resolution number 264.
It's been moved by the Alderman from the 9th, seconded by the Alderwoman from the 11th, that we suspend the rules for the purposes introducing Resolution 264. This is a non-debatable motion. Madam Clerk, please call the roll.
Alderwoman Schweitzer. Alderman Odenberg.
Aye.
Alderman Cone.
No.
Alderman Ryan. Alderman Devoti.
Aye.
Alderwoman Velasquez. Aye. Alderwoman Saunier. Aye. Alderwoman Cox-Santui. Alderman Browning.
Aye.
Alderwoman Clark Hubbard.
Aye.
Alderwoman Keys.
Aye.
Alderwoman Tyus.
Aye.
Alderwoman Boyd.
Aye.
Alderman Aldridge. President Green.
Aye.
14 aye votes, 1 no vote.
By your vote, you sustain the motion from the Alderman from the 9th. Madam Clerk, if you could please place Resolution 264 at the end of the courtesy resolution calendar.
So noted.
Courtesy resolutions, Alderwoman from the 10th. All right, Alderman from the 14th, you are recognized on the motion to adopt the courtesy resolution consent calendar.
I move that we adopt the courtesy resolution.
I want it to be added. Can you give me 1 second?
Go ahead, Alderwoman from the 10th.
I'm sorry. I want it to be added as a co-sponsor resolution 264.
Madam
noted.
Clerk, please make note of that. Right, then Alderwoman from the 10th, you are recognized on the motion to adopt the courtesy resolution consent calendar.
Thank you, Madam President, members of the board. I move that we adopt the courtesy resolution consent calendar.
It's been moved by the Alderwoman from the 10th, seconded by the Alderman from the 3rd, that we adopt the courtesy resolution consent calendar. Is there any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. Miscellaneous and unfinished business.
We have none.
We can dispense with line item 25, announcements.
Tuesday, March 17th, HUD's Committee at 11 a.m. in the Kennedy Room. Legislation and Rules, 2 p.m. via webinar. Wednesday, March 18th, Public Infrastructure and Utilities, 3:30 p.m. in the Kennedy Room. Friday, March 20th, 2026, full board meeting, 10 a.m. in the chambers.
Any further announcements? Any further announcements? Alderwoman from the 1st.
Thank you, Madam President and members of the board. I would like to add a red tape committee meeting on Wednesday, March 18th at 12 noon for the purposes of hearing Board Bill 152.
Madam Clerk, please make note of that. Any further announcements? Alderwoman from the 10th.
I'm making my announcement. As you can see, you can tell what my announcement going to be. You notice what tomorrow is, 314 Day. Happy 314 Day Eve. There's way too many 314 Day events for me to stand up here and talk about, but notice that everybody today is rocking that 314 Day gear thanks to our very own Aura. So thank you, Aura, for kicking out the spirit. Thank you, Alderwoman Sanye and others that helped to get us together over in the Leisure Room. We have all of our St. Louis favorites, and we were intentional about supporting our St. Louis businesses. I picked up Papa Parade from the Foundry yesterday. We have Emos, Gus's, Vesses, Old Vienna, all kind of our, again, St. Louis favorites with gooey butter cakes, dad cookies, everything over there. So please, after we take our picture, make sure you go back over and enjoy. And then today, from 4 to 6, shout out to our Collector of Revenue, Greg Daly, in the efforts not only that he is doing on the ground right now, but also he is having a happy hour today that will benefit RETAP. RETAP is our real estate tax assistance fund, you know, that we have all continued to support down here when we talk about anti-displacement funding, spirit, movement, and programming in the city of St. Louis. RETAP is just that. And so shout out to Gregory FX Daly and Urban Chestnut in the Grove in the 9th Ward, the Brewery and Beer Hall from 4 to 6 today. They are Have a Beer event is going on. You can stop by, meet your Collector of Revenue, Gregory FX Daly, and proceeds do benefit and go to the Real Estate Tax Assistance Fund. I hope to see you there.
Alderman from the 4th.
Thank you, Madam President, members of the board. I know there's a little parade going on downtown, but I think this weekend, but more importantly, on Tuesday, it's St. Patrick's Day, and there'll be a big parade going on in Dogtown. I'd encourage you all to come out, drink a beer, have fun.
Alderman from the 14th, are you up for an announcement? Are you up for an announcement?
Yes, happy 314 Day, St. Louis.
Alderman from the 3rd.
Yeah, just to clarify, my colleague from the 4th, I believe he was referring to the St. Patrick's Day parade that's happening tomorrow, along with the St. Patrick's Day festivities that are happening in the Dogtown neighborhood next Tuesday. I look forward to participating and seeing everyone there.
Any further announcements? Any further announcements? Seeing none, just before you slink out of the room, Alderman Narayan, I'm looking at you. We want to make sure that we gather on the steps here to get a 314 Day picture of everyone. Alderwoman from the 7th.
Thank you, Madam President, members of the board. I want to wish my least favorite I'm just kidding. I want to wish the Alderman from the 14th an early happy birthday. His birthday will be on Sunday, so happy birthday to you, Alderman.
All right, with that, Alderwoman from the 10th, you are recognized on the motion to excuse.
Thank you, Madam President, members of the board. All members were present this morning.
Alderwoman from the 10th, you are recognized on the motion to adjourn.
Somebody said everybody. Thank you, Madam President, members of the board. I move that we adjourn until Friday, March 20th, 2026 in the Board of Aldermen chambers at 10 a.m.
It's been moved by the Alderwoman from the 10th, seconded by lots of folks over there. I will say the 11th, I think, is who I heard the loudest, that we adjourn until Friday, March 20th, 2026 in the Board of Aldermen chambers at 10 a.m. Any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed?
No.
Motion carries. Everybody is adjourned except for the Alderman from the 2nd. Oh, was it? It sounded like it's over the...
I'm going.